Chapter 50-25. That's my secret. Zhong Jie said reluctantly. That's also my secret. Xiao Hua replied with a smile. All right. Zhong Jie had no choice but to stop asking about it. He changed the topic and asked, how do you feel after using this witchcraft? Previously, I felt like I couldn't breathe, but now, I feel more at ease. Xiao Hua didn't hide anything and replied, and I feel that this witchcraft can exert 40% of its power under the confinement of heaven and earth. Oh, I see. Zhong Jie nodded and said, I was wondering why the restrictive spell in the Wuming mountain range was so strange. It turns out that it was the work of soul cultivators. Could it be that there are treasures of soul cultivators in the Lost Land, and they want to prevent others from finding them? I don't think so. Xiao Hua answered casually, but after saying those words, he realized something and changed the topic with a smile. Because in the Wuming mountain range, how can there be an existence that surpasses the laws of the Yilin continent? The restrictive spell in front of us seems to be more powerful than the laws of heaven and earth, so it's unlikely that it was created by soul cultivators. Also, think about it, the Wuming mountain range can't possibly end here, right? On the other side of the Broken Blade Ridge, there might be soul cultivators as well. Soul cultivators shouldn't have divided their branch of soul cultivators into two, right? You're right. Zhong Jie pondered for a moment and nodded. But I don't understand. I feel that there's something strange about this restrictive spell, but I can't tell exactly what it is. It's as if it's already at the tip of my tongue, but I've forgotten it. It's really strange. If even you don't know, then I don't know either. Xiao Hua answered helplessly. Zhong Jie was an angel of the Holy Light Realm, not a human. Xiao Hua naturally couldn't tell her the situation of the immortal formation between the three continents and the Dawn Rain continent. He also couldn't explain the difference between the restrictive spell and the immortal formation here. Since you've already used your soul spell, can you find any transmission tunnel here? Zhong Jie asked again. Xiao Hua shook his head. I've already explored it. This restrictive spell goes straight through the heaven and earth, and it's seamless. There's no flaw at all. How can there be a transmission tunnel here? Zhong Jie was also surprised and said, I'm the same as you. I only feel that there's a mountain-like restriction in front of me. It was as if the entire sky had fallen, and there was no sign of life at all. However, the strange thing is that I once went to the sky nearby in my early years. Although the restriction was like a mountain, the wind in the sky could still blow through, and light should be able to pass through as well. However, my holy light couldn't pass through. Forget it, there's no need to probe for now. Xiao Hua says with a smile, I once asked the two alliance heads of the Heaven Alliance and the Dao Alliance. They didn't know how to pass through this restriction either. Since this Du Peng said that they have a way to defeat the Immortal Alliance, and that there are people who have successfully passed, then let's just wait for them to come up with something. I don't think the words of the demon race can be trusted. Zhong Jie shook his head slightly, expressing his disappointment in the cooperation with the demon race. Then why are you still cooperating with him? Xiao Hua asks back. Back then, I wanted to pass through the Wuming mountain range to go to the Lost Land. However, when I arrived at the location of this heaven and earth restriction, I couldn't move even a single step. When I was worried, I met Du Peng. He said that he had a way to pass through this restriction, but he needed my help. Zhong Jie doesn't hide too much and tells the story of the matter. I had no choice but to cooperate with him. However, this wait actually took nearly 1,000 years. Du Peng is a human who was possessed by a demon general. I don't know his character. Xiao Hua thinks for a moment and says, but I know some demons. They're definitely not what you think. Unfortunately, before Xiao Hua can finish, Zhong Jie decisively interrupts and says impatiently, what's so good about the demon race? They're even darker and more bloodthirsty than the human race. Don't mention it again. All right. Xiao Hua shrugs and doesn't say any more. At this time, Du Peng quietly flies in front of Zhong Jie and bows. Senior, you must still remember our previous agreement. Zhong Jie looks at Du Peng in confusion and says, of course I remember. What's wrong? It's good that Senior remembers. Du Peng sighs in relief and says with a smile, Junior is afraid that after so many years, you've forgotten. How is that possible? Zhong Jie replies indifferently, I'm a man of my word. As long as we're in the transmission tunnel, I'll help you if I can. If I can pass through the transmission tunnel, I'll definitely take you there. That's good, that's good. Du Peng obtains Zhong Jie's guarantee and a smile appears on his face. He turns around to leave the flying boat and says, since Senior keeps his promise, Junior will also begin to prepare. When Du Peng flies far away, he sends out an order for some disciples of the Failure Valley Immortal Union to go over. It seems like he's whispering something. Only then does Zhong Jie send a strange sound transmission. Xiao Hua, what does Du Peng mean by this? Xiao Hua hears this and laughs in his heart. He sends a sound transmission to Zhong Jie and says, it's very simple. Because you previously subdued the soul beast tentacle, and in these 3 months, you pointed out an extremely safe path. Therefore, he's afraid that you'll raise more conditions, or that you'll treat your previous sacrifice as a condition and reduce your previous promise to him after entering the transmission tunnel. Boring. Zhong Jie mutters in disgust. What are these demons thinking every day? If I've already agreed, how can I not keep my word? Xiao Hua blushes with shame. He knows that the reason Du Peng is so worried isn't because of the demon General Ji Peng, but more because of Du Peng's own human weakness. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua unconsciously looks to the other side. Bai Fei and Yi Yun are standing 3 kilometers away. Bai Fei's expression is normal, but Yi Yun's pair of eyes glances at Bai Fei from time to time. It seems that after more than a year of interaction, the two have progressed very quickly. This Bai Fei said before that if we enter the transmission tunnel together, he will lend this Xiao a hand. I wonder if he will agree. However, since we're no longer in the same group, he must have forgotten about this matter. Xiao Hua ridicules in his heart. He knows that Bai Fei's words can't be taken seriously. However, just as his gaze leaves, he suddenly raises his eyebrows and returns to the space between Yi Yun's eyebrows. He says curiously, that's strange, why is there an additional ball of yin qi between Yi Yun's eyebrows? Could it be that something went wrong with her cultivation recently? Seniors. At this moment, Shui Chong opens his mouth and says, Lord Special Envoy has already sent a message asking everyone to take out their own selection treasures. We'll be ready. En. Xiao Hua retracts his gaze and takes out the windy wheel from his daoist robe. Everyone beside him also takes out the treasures they obtained during the selection. Lan Yuxuan takes out a copper ore that's entirely yellow in color. It's engraved with thunder patterns. When it's swung, there's no need to channel transcendence energy and the sound of thunder will be produced. It's the famous roaring thunder ore. Venomous Master Poison Stone took out 2 palm-sized pieces of wood. The wood pieces were hollowed out in the shape of wings, and the edges of the wood pieces were engraved with strange patterns. They looked like green seal scripts, but also like Dao talismans. Xiao Hua had heard Venomous Master Poison Stone say that these magic treasures were wood spirit wings. Shi Qing took out a blue stone puppet. This stone puppet was also very strange. It was covered with misty textures, and as Shi Qing waved it, countless wisps of smoke would seep out from the textures. This wisp of smoke would fall into the air and immediately disappear. There was nothing special about it, but the name Light Smoke Puppet was as good as a treasure. Xu Liuyue's name sounds very poetic, but he doesn't look refined and looks similar to the fallen Huang Chufan. Hence, the Dharma treasure he's holding is the same as Huang Chufan's, the demonic red button. The demonic red button is not large and is only a foot long. In the middle is a sacrificial ring with some demonic patterns on it, but most of them are sesame-sized black spots. The spots can't be seen with the naked eye, but by releasing one's spiritual force, one can see that under the spots are concave spots of various sizes. The concave spots are filled with talismans. With Xiao Hua's knowledge, he also saw the demonic red button, but he doesn't know what it's used for. As for the nascent soul realm cultivators of the Defeat Immortal Union, Men Sifeng, and the Golden Core realm cultivators, Hui Jin, Yi Ping, and Zhong Qi, they didn't take out any Dharma treasures. Instead, they walked towards Xiao Hua and the others and looked at Shui Chong. After Shui Chong gave the order, the leaders of the other groups also began to give orders. In each group, there were either 5 Dharma treasures, 4 Dharma treasures, or 3 Dharma treasures. No one has seen only 2 Dharma treasures. Shui Chong was not in a hurry to give orders again. Instead, he looked down at the token around his neck and waited for Du Peng's orders. There were some nascent soul realm cultivators near Du Peng, all of whom were disciples of the Defeat Immortal Union. When Xiao Hua took a look, his heart skipped a beat because there were exactly 365 of them. Xiao Hua didn't probe previously, but at this moment, Du Peng seemed to have already finished giving orders. He looked at the broken blade ridge in the distance, pinched his chin, and thought for a moment before raising his hand again. He pointed a few times at the ground near the mountain ridge, and the 365 disciples moved and landed in various places to form a Dharma array. The Dharma array was in the shape of a pentagon, and the 365 disciples stood there neatly. It seemed that the distance between each disciple was similar. Of course, nearly half of the disciples were floating in mid-air. Du Peng saw that the disciples had set up the array formation, and as they activated their dharmic powers, waves of fluctuations were emitted from the disciples. After the fluctuations gathered in the center of the Dharma array, they condensed into one and then rushed towards the broken blade ridge. Du Peng nodded in satisfaction and turned to look at the other disciples who were already prepared. He said with a smile, "Everyone, the broken blade ridge is already in front of us, and the lost place is also close at hand. If possible, we can reach the barren land of immortal cultivators at this time tomorrow, so now, let's practice the teleportation flying boat. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to the starting point to subscribe to support it, vote for it, vote for it, vote for it, give it a tip, and thank you for all forms of support." Chapter 50-26. Then, Du Peng ordered, "Head disciples, set up the bone flying boat and teach the control method to the disciples." Yes. Shui Chong and the other disciples listened to the order. After agreeing, they reached out and took out a 1-foot-long bone from the silk bag at their waists. They each activated their magic power, and after their true qi entered the bone, a green flame emerged from the bone. A bone flying boat that was more than 100 feet in size floated in front of Xiao Hua and the others. Then, Shui Chong took out a few jade slips and handed them to Xiao Hua and the others. He smiled and said, "Everyone, the teleportation flying boat doesn't need to be controlled by you. What you need to do is to activate the Dharma treasures that you have obtained and cooperate with me. This jade slip contains the cooperation method. Please take a look." Du Peng is really scheming. This bone flying boat is clearly a soul artifact, and the control and cooperation method was only taken out now. Those who were injured and withdrew couldn't have known that there was such a method. Xiao Hua looked at the bone flying boat and the jade slip in his hand and secretly thought, but he didn't say much. He used his divine sense to take a look and understood that it was nothing more than some simple spells. Then, Lan Yuxuan and the other nascent soul cultivators also finished reading. Shui Chong jumped onto the bone flying boat first. After activating it with his not-so-strong soul power, the flying boat gradually began to transform. 9 skull-like deep holes appeared on it. Without waiting for Shui Chong to speak, Men Shifeng, Hui Jin, Yi Ping, and Zhongqi flew up first and landed in the 4 outermost deep holes. Then, Shui Chong looked at Xiao Hua and the others, smiled, and pointed to the remaining 5 deep holes. He said, "Senior Xiao, who controls the wind underworld wheel, please sit here. Senior Lan, who controls the thunder roar ore, please sit here. Senior Poison Stone, who controls the wood spirit wings, please sit here. Senior Shu, who controls the light smoke roar, please sit here. Senior Shu, who controls the devil red button, please sit here." When everyone is seated, don't activate the Dharma treasures first. Wait for me to give the order. Shui Chong was still respectful, although his cultivation level didn't seem to be much worse than Lan Yuxuan and the others. Xiao Hua and the others didn't hesitate and landed on the bone flying boat. Once everyone was seated, Shui Chong looked around and saw that most of the cultivators were already seated. He then said, Venomous Stone, please activate your magic treasure." Buzz. As Venomous Stone activated his magic power, the wood spirit wings let out a faint rumbling sound. They turned into 100-meter-long wings and extended out from both sides of the bone-flying ship. "Senior Shu, please activate your magic treasure." Boom. With a muffled sound, The light smoke puppet in Shaqing's hand turned into a stone puppet and emerged in front of the bone-flying boat to protect it. Senior Xiao, please activate your magic treasure. Boom. Xiao Hua slightly urged his magic power, and the wind serene will flew out from the bottom of the white bone-flying boat, turning into a series of rings that protected the bottom of the white bone-flying boat. Wisps of wind gradually appeared on the surface of the rings, and it had quite the effect of the orchid boat. It's Senior Lan's roaring thunder or's turn. Well said. Lan Yuxuan slightly smiled, and the magic power in his body surged. Boom boom boom. A burst of thunder came from the roaring thunder or, and at the same time, thunder came from other places. The roaring thunder or turned into a thunderbolt and extended out from both sides of the bone-flying boat. Good. Thank you, seniors. Finally, Senior Shu, please activate the red devil button. Shui Chong's face showed joy, and he clapped his hands and said with a smile. Shu Liuyu naturally didn't delay. She urged her magic power, and the red devil button flew into the air, turning into a ring the same size as the flying boat. The previous sesame-sized dent on the ring had now expanded, and it spewed out demonic chi like a spirit snake. The demonic chi condensed into a rope around the ring, and when the ring fell, the demonic chi immediately bound Xiao Hua and the others. Seeing this, Shaqing hurriedly shouted, Shui Chong, what are you doing? Senior Shi, don't be anxious. Let me explain. Shui Chong slightly smiled, and raised his hand to point at the bone-flying boat below him. The flying boat immediately emitted a dark green luster, blocking the demonic chi. He replied, Senior must have seen that the one activating the flying boat is not me, nor is Senior alone. It is the 10 of us. We can't do it without anyone, so the 10 of us are one. According to the disciples of my Defeat You Immortal Alliance who went into the transmission tunnel, the space inside vibrated, and even nascent soul cultivators couldn't control their own bodies. So, to be together with the flying boat, we must be bound by magic treasures. Sir Special Envoy found many magic treasures to test, and finally found the red devil button. Although this item has some demonic chi, it complements the fluctuations of the flying boat. Okay. Shaqing naturally wasn't a cultivator who had been possessed by the demonic chi, but he wasn't a good person either. He had followed the Defeat You Immortal Alliance for more than a year, so how could he not know what he had encountered? Therefore, he felt helpless in his heart, and didn't dare to say anything. After nodding in agreement, the red devil button fell, firmly binding everyone to the bone-flying boat. Junior sect brother men, junior sect brothers, please get ready. Shui Chong's face tightened, and he ordered in a low voice. Men Shifeng and the other Immortal Alliance disciples rubbed their hands together, and strands of soul power were produced from their bodies, landing on the bone-flying boat. The entire flying boat gradually began to flicker, swaying left and right. Everyone, please activate your magic treasures. Shui Chong pressed his palms on the flying boat, and the entire boat immediately stabilized. Then, Shui Chong shouted. Xiao Hua and the others activated their transcendence energy according to his words. Light smoke, light wind, and lightning energy emerged from all over the place. Then, the demonic aura on the devil crimson buckle flourished, enveloping the entire white bone-flying ship. The flying ship shot up into the sky. So that's how it is. Seeing that the bone-flying boat was actually able to fly freely under the confinement of heaven and earth, Xiao Hua somewhat understood. He nodded inwardly. Du Peng used a soul tool as the foundation, a magic treasure outside of the 5 elements as support, and demonic chi as protection. It really has a miraculous effect. This flying boat must be able to fly freely in the transportation tunnel that restricts the 5 element. This kind of method, even this Xiao couldn't think of it in a short time. After Shui Chong controlled the flying boat to rush into the sky, it didn't take long for even more flying boats to rise into the sky. Everyone was flying high in the sky, and what they lacked was some coordination. In less than half a cup of tea's time, the entire bone-flying boat was as smooth as if it was controlled by a single person. After familiarizing themselves with the cultivation method for a meal, Shui Chong controlled the bone-flying boat to descend from the sky. After everyone withdrew their magic power, Shui Chong reported to Du Peng through the token. Not long after, another disciple came over, took out 10 storage rings, and respectfully handed them over to everyone, saying, "This is a reward from Sir Special Envoy." Shui Chong was overjoyed. He hurriedly received the storage rings and bowed, saying, "This is what this disciple should do." Xiao Hua and the others also received them. Because they couldn't look through the storage rings in this place, everyone temporarily put them away. Shui Chong smiled and said a few more words to everyone before putting away the bone-flying boat. He took out a jade bottle from his bosom, poured out several scarlet pills, and took them with Men Kaifeng and the others. Xiao Hua glanced at these pills and knew that they were used by soul cultivators. It was likely that Shui Chong and the others had used too much soul power just now. But then, Xiao Hua was bewildered. They had only flown for a short while, and they had to rely on pills. Then what if they entered the transportation tunnel? Forget it. Xiao Hua glanced at the nascent soul cultivators chatting and laughing beside him. Ever since Huang Chufan and ancestor Yu Ji died, Venomous Stone and the others no longer discussed how to kill him. However, from their subsequent sound transmissions, Xiao Hua knew that Shu Liuyu and the others weren't good people, so Xiao Hua didn't care about their lives. He thought to himself, "Let's talk about it after we enter the transportation tunnel." Not to mention the nascent soul cultivators and the Dark Oak Immortal Union disciples chatting and laughing, Zhong Jie's expression became even more unsightly as he looked at the devilish aura fluttering nearby. Du Peng stole a glance, then flew to the side and respectfully said, "Senior, this junior has a suggestion, but I don't know if I should say it." "Say it." Zhong Jie coldly replied. "Senior's strength is too great. The transportation tunnel might not be able to withstand Senior's entry, so this junior has already prepared a blood-red robe for Senior to help Senior conceal his cultivation." Du Peng took out a blood-red robe as thin as a cicada's wing from a silk pouch and respectfully handed it to Zhong Jie. "Take it away." Zhong Jie glanced at it and coldly said, "What do you think I am? How can I wear this thing?" "But..." Du Peng's forehead was covered in sweat, and he hurriedly explained, "This junior definitely didn't tamper with it, it was just for Senior. Whether or not you tamper with it, I can see it clearly." Zhong Jie didn't even look at Du Peng and replied, "It's precisely because you didn't tamper with it that you're standing in front of me in perfect condition. All right." Du Peng helplessly took the blood-red robe and said, "If Senior has the means, then that's for the best. Otherwise, please reconsider, don't worry." Zhong Jie unhappily glanced at Xiao Hua and said, "If others can do it, then so can I." Du Peng didn't quite understand Zhong Jie's indirect meaning, and hurriedly nodded, "Yes, this junior understand." Another hour passed, and all the bone airships had been tested. Truly, everything was ready except for the east wind. However, this east wind had been waiting for more than 10 days. Xiao Hua didn't know how many times his soul consciousness had scanned the restrictions of heaven and earth around Cutting Blade Ridge, but he didn't find any signs of the restrictions that separated heaven and earth loosening. "Senior, don't be impatient. Senior, don't be impatient." Du Peng didn't need to explain anything to the disciples of the Immortal Union, but he couldn't not explain to Zhong Jie. This sentence was probably what he often said in the past 10 days. In fact, not only was Zhong Jie impatient, Xiao Hua's heart also seemed to be constantly scratched by a small hand. He had endured for so long that he really felt like he couldn't endure it anymore. Actually, he could directly use thunderous methods to interrogate Du Peng, and even defeat Alliance Master Lian Feng of the Immortal Union. However, he placed too much importance on returning to the Dawn Rain continent. He was afraid that he would miss the opportunity to return if he didn't do something appropriate, so he carefully mixed with nascent soul cultivators. However, in the end, he couldn't see this opportunity again and again, and anyone would be angry. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to Chijian to subscribe to support, vote for a month, vote for a recommendation, collect, reward, and thank all forms of support. Chapter 5027. However, at dusk on this day, a stripe of multicolored light suddenly appeared in the originally gloomy darkness. This multicolored light was like a strange rune that covered the entire sky. In front of Cutting Blade Ridge, the sky and earth were sealed, so it was impossible to tell the time apart. Only day and night were distinct. Seeing the light thinning out, Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly sent out his soul sense to the left of Cutting Blade Ridge, only to be disappointed again. There were still no signs of the seal loosening. But it was at this time that Du Peng's voice rang out, "Everyone, the time we've been waiting for is about to arrive. Please make your preparations." Du Peng was wild with joy. There was even the word please in his command. Not only was Xiao Hua puzzled, even Zhong Jie was looking at the sky with 7-colored eyes. Looking at Cutting Blade Ridge, he asked curiously, "Du Peng, what's going on? The seal doesn't show any signs of loosening." "Senior, don't worry." Du Peng's words were smooth, but his face was no longer nervous. Instead, it was filled with confidence. Smiling, he said, "This phenomenon didn't exceed Alliance Master Lian's expectations. This junior has already arranged everything. Senior only needs to wait for the teleportation tunnel. If we're lucky, Senior will be able to reach the Lost Lands through the tunnel tomorrow morning." "Lucky?" Zhong Jie looked at Du Peng. It wasn't clear if he was talking to Du Peng or Xiao Hua, "So you're saying that even if we find the teleportation tunnel, with our careful arrangements, only 1 in 10,000 will be able to pass through it?" Du Peng smiled bitterly. Looking to his left, he transmitted, "Senior is right. And this is also because Senior is here. Otherwise, even if this junior came, this junior wouldn't have a 10% chance." "Then what if I came?" Zhong Jie asked with interest. "I won't hide it from Senior. Even with Senior, there's only a 20% chance." Du Peng whispered back. 20%. Zhong Jie glanced at Xiao Hua and transmitted, "With you, there should be 30%, right?" "I don't know." Xiao Hua still couldn't see anything from the sky, so he didn't dare to say anything. "How many can pass?" Zhong Jie asked Du Peng again. "It's hard to say." Du Peng thought for a moment and said, "Maybe only Senior, or maybe Junior as well. If the other disciples are lucky, maybe less than 5 will be able to pass." "You're really willing to send your disciples to their death?" Zhong Jie said sarcastically. Du Peng did not answer this question. Instead, he narrowed his eyes and looked at the changes in the sky as if he was observing some signs. Soon, the sky darkened again. The area around the restrictive shield that was already dark became even darker. There was no light at all. Du Peng looked at the time and then looked at the night sky that seemed to have never seen any stars or moon since he entered the Wuming mountain range. He raised his hand and a fist-sized white bead appeared. The white bead soared into the sky, but it stopped for a moment and then fell back down. The 5 elements of heaven and earth near the broken blade ridge had begun to be confined. Ordinary magic weapons could not be used. Du Peng did not panic. He suddenly raised his head and roared, "Roar!" Devil chi gushed out from all over his body like ink. Along with the roar, puff! A column of bloodlight soared into the sky and hit the white bead. Woo woo woo! The white bead made a shrill sound like a ghost wailing and a wolf howling. It expanded rapidly in the bloodlight. In just a few breaths, it had turned into a skeleton that was dozens of feet tall. This skeleton was a little strange. It was so white that it looked quite scary. However, the bones were as white as a flower. It emitted a pale white light, illuminating the surrounding area for a few miles. Tens of thousands of cultivators didn't care about the night. They could see clearly without any light. However, when they saw the white light, they couldn't help but feel hopeful. Although the majority of these cultivators were humans who had been possessed. "Disciples, get ready!" Du Peng roared. The black gas around his body had already turned into a black robe. Although he didn't show the face of a demon, Du Peng no longer concealed his identity as a demon general. Along with Du Peng's order, the 365 disciples of the Broken Blade Immortal Union responded. They stood at the place where they had tried countless times before. Each of them sat down cross-legged, either in the air or on the ground. Seeing that the pentagonal magic formation had already taken shape, Du Peng looked around again. He suppressed the joy in his heart and shouted, "Disciples, get ready." "Yes." Shui Chong and the other head disciples answered in unison. They took Xiao Hua, Bai Fei, and the others to stand in different places of the Broken Blade Ridge. Strange. Xiao Hua's soul had never been withdrawn. However, at this moment, he still didn't find any sign of the restriction loosening. Even the restriction of heaven and earth was the same as before. It was as cold as a mountain without the slightest change. Xiao Hua really didn't know what kind of mysterious method Du Peng had. Silence, dead silence. There wasn't even a wind, let alone the chirping of birds and insects. Under the white light of the skeletons, the entire earth was like a tomb. Everyone was like a dead person, not daring to move. Just as everything came to a standstill, a miracle occurred. In the pitch-black night sky, a ray of red light suddenly appeared. This red light was like a needle that pierced through the darkness. Following that, even more red lights tore through the darkness like flying sword. The red light that filled the sky was like countless flowing blood, gradually washing the entire sky. Ah! On the dead silent earth, many cultivators who didn't know what was going on exclaimed in surprise. They watched the blood-red light slowly fall from the sky, dyeing the earth and the pale white skeletons. The originally white light became even more red. This is... Xiao Hua saw the blood-red brilliance and felt an unimaginable familiarity in his heart. A voice shouted in his heart, "Damn it! Isn't this Hutu great god's sacrificial night? Isn't this red light the moonlight of the blood-red sacrificial moon?" Just as this thought appeared in Xiao Hua's mind, he saw that in the red horizon, a scarlet crescent shaped like a small boat was peeking out of the pitch-black darkness. And between the heavens and earth, rumbling sounds of laws shaking came pouring down like a landslide and a tsunami. Xiao Hua had not retracted his soul sense, but he had already seen the mountain-like restrictive barrier swaying slightly. Layers of smoke-like ripples rose from the restrictive barrier, breaking it into pieces and drifting in the air. Although the heaven and earth restrictive barrier had separated the Wuming mountain range from the millions of Meng mountains, and had mercilessly separated the descendants of the 12 great gods, it still couldn't stop the merciful gaze of Hutu great god. During the sacrificial night, Hutu great god tore apart the heaven and earth restrictive barrier, showering the 2 Wuming mountains with the blessings of the blood moon. While Xiao Hua was shocked, he suddenly recalled Ziming's words, "Every time Hutu great god performs the sacrificial night, the entire Meng mountains would be covered in the color of blood. The heaven and earth would be grateful, and the people would be grateful. Even some soul beasts would come out from their hiding places and offer sacrifices to Hutu great god, expressing their gratitude for the blessings of Hutu great god. Offering sacrifices to Hutu great god. Thank you, Hutu great god." Xiao Hua couldn't help but murmur in his heart, "I know I'm useless, I know nothing, and I have nothing. I only hope that tonight, I can borrow the power of Hutu great god to pass through the heaven and earth restrictive barrier and return to the Dawn Rain continent, so that I can find a way to break the immortal formation and save the billions of lives in the 3 continents that are about to be destroyed." Perhaps Xiao Hua's prayer was effective, because the blood moon, which had just revealed 30% of its original crescent moon and was about to be covered by the pitch-black restrictive barrier, suddenly shone brightly. The color of blood fell from the sky like rain, sprinkling on the Wuming mountain range, the cutting blade ridge, and the heaven and earth restrictive barrier that no one could break. Xiao Hua was overjoyed, and he even released his soul sense crazily. Amidst the madness of the blood moon, only Zhongjie could sense Xiao Hua's soul sense. The other cultivators naturally couldn't sense it. However, at this time, Zhongjie was a little frightened, because under the blood moon, her body was also dyed red. She was originally a spiritual body, and that red color was the power of heaven and earth. Unexpectedly, it was slowly invading her body. An indescribable anxiety, a kind of bloodlust that had never appeared before, was gradually born along with an even more dense compassion. Xiao Hua's soul sense spread out for more than 1,000 li, but the heaven and earth restrictive barrier in the sky was still like a 10,000 li mountain, with no end at all. Although the blood moon violently shook the mountain peak, no cracks appeared on the mountain peak. Instead, the surface layer of the heaven and earth restrictive barrier peeled off along with the fluctuations, becoming more and more solid. Xiao Hua was a little dumbfounded. "This won't do. This is simply impossible to tear open the heaven and earth restrictive barrier. Moreover, I feel that the heaven and earth restrictive barrier is as heavy as a mountain, far from just 1 or 2 layers of heaven and earth restrictive barrier. Even if I tear it open and rush in, I will definitely be trapped inside and won't be able to escape. However, even so, this Xiao has no choice but to fly up and take a look." However, at this moment, The sound of flowing water faintly appeared in Xiao Hua's ears. Xiao Hua was stunned, he couldn't believe his ears. After all, after entering the Wuming mountain range and approaching the Broken Blade Ridge, there was almost no water flow. How could there be water flow at this time? Not to mention Xiao Hua, even the other cultivators were stunned, they hurriedly looked around. However, under the blood moon, everything was blood red, the cultivators didn't see any water flow, they also didn't know where this increasingly loud sound of flowing water came from. Hutu God. Xiao Hua was naturally different from the other cultivators. His gaze landed on the blood-red ground, under the Wuming mountain range. He couldn't help but exclaim in his heart, "So, this is the sacrificial night." Under the surface of the Wuming mountain range, there was a stream of blood flowing from all over the Wuming mountain range. This stream of blood was innumerable, it seemed to be boundless at a glance. This innumerable stream of blood flowed down the Broken Blade Ridge like a myriad of streams returning to their source. In every stream of blood, there was a soul, and in every stream of soul, there was a natural soul power. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please subscribe to it at Chijian, vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, collect it, gift it, thank you for all of your support. Chapter 5028. Xiao Hua was enlightened. Ziming's words appeared in Xiao Hua's mind again. According to the ancient legends, the moon tear is the divine eye of Hutu great god. Under the bloodlight, all the evil beings in the Meng Mountains will be wiped out. Most of the sacrificial ceremonies in the Hutu stronghold will be held during the sacrificial night. If I were to light up my soul lamp at this time, I would be blessed by Hutu great god easily. Elder Wu wouldn't even need to do anything. When Hutu great god opens her divine eye, it is also the time when Hutu great god opens her arms. If we can enter her arms now, we will be pitied by Hutu great god and preserve the souls of the descendants of Meng Mountains. On the day of reincarnation, they will still retain their memories of this life. Xiao Hua thought to himself, of course. Ziming is right. In my dimension, I already have Nuo Yeching, the reincarnation of Master Go Qin, as a living example. However, the most important function of the sacrificial night is not this, but the moon tear, to watch the wandering souls in the Wuming Mountains return to Hutu great god's arms. Just like what Fairy Hong Xia said, it is like the Ghost Festival in the Xiaoyu continent. On the day of the Ghost Festival, the 9 underworlds' door will open and hundreds of ghosts will roam the mountains. Everything will be avoided. The most amazing thing is, Hutu great god's nether blood sea seems to be at the Hutu stronghold, which is the other side of the natural seal. If the wandering souls in the Wuming Mountains want to go there, they have to go through the natural seal. That's why the Defeat Immortal Alliance discovered this phenomenon. Based on his understanding of the sacrificial night, Alliance Master Lian Feng made so many preparations. He waited for the moon tear to appear and followed the blood of the wandering souls to go through the natural seal. The teleportation tunnel that Du Peng mentioned is actually not a real teleportation tunnel. It is a soul item activated by the disciples of the Defeat Immortal Alliance who have cultivated soul spells. Just as Xiao Hua was thinking, Du Peng's voice of command sounded out once more, and those 365 disciples of the defeated Immortal Alliance withdrew fist-sized blood pearls from their pockets. Xiao Hua swept them with his gaze and couldn't help but sigh. He was able to see clearly that these were precisely the baleful blood pearls he saw in the Wen clan earlier. Previously, Wen Ju had sacrificed so many Wen clan disciples to refine a single blood fiend spirit pearl. Now that Du Peng had taken out 365 blood fiend spirit pearls, who knew how many cultivators and humans he had sacrificed in the past hundreds of years? Damn it! Xiao Hua clenched his teeth and cursed on the ground. Zhong Jie was even more shocked. The milky white holy light around him flickered like a candle in the night wind. PFFF, PFFF. Not only that, the 365 disciples took out blood beads and threw them into the air without saying a word. Then, they slapped their own heads, and a blood infant covered in demonic patterns flew out. The blood infant waved its hand and hit the bodies below it. A series of popping sounds rang out, and the 365 disciples who were still alive just a moment ago turned into blood. The blood infant opened its mouth and sucked the blood into its body. The demonic patterns on its body began to tremble violently. The blood infant cackled and charged headfirst into the blood demon spirit pearl. Buzz! The 365 blood demon spirit pearls emitted a strange demonic light. Boom! As the demonic light of the blood demon spirit pearls flashed, the 365 blood demon spirit pearls collided with each other. After a loud bang, waves of blood were created. Countless wandering souls struggled like drowning humans. The thick smell of blood spread in all directions. However, no matter how much the smell of blood spread, the blood and wandering souls could only cover the area where the array was. They couldn't cross half a step into the lightning pool. Seeing that the blood demon spirit pearls were gathering, Du Peng didn't dare to slow down. He took out a bone box and opened it. It was the blood talisman that the 5 envoys used together. Woo! Without Du Peng's command, the blood talisman immediately flew up into the sky. Waves of strange green patterns began to appear around the blood talisman. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 365 blood infants that rushed into the blood demon spirit pearls earlier flew out again and rushed into the blood talisman. Boom! Another earth-shaking rumble sounded. The blood infant had already turned into a blood stain that flashed with green light. It brought along 365 waves of blood as it rushed towards the Broken Blade Ridge. In the depths of the Wuming mountain range, boom! The blood waves hit the heaven and earth restriction. A powerful force suddenly fell from the sky. This force enveloped Xiao Hua and the others. Damn it! Once Xiao Hua sensed this enormous force, he immediately understood what had happened. With so many souls attacking the restriction, it would naturally cause a backlash from the restriction. Even if his strength was at its peak, he would probably be unable to resist this unparalleled enormous force. Everyone, don't be afraid. Just as Xiao Hua was thinking about how to deal with it, Du Peng's voice sounded. If there was only one person here, I'm afraid that even Long Shenzi wouldn't be able to deal with this force. However, there are tens of thousands of us. This force is evenly distributed among tens of thousands of people. Believe this old man, even if you are a Golden Core disciple, you will definitely be unharmed. Just as Du Peng's voice fell, the force had already fallen. Just as Du Peng said, most of the force fell on the blood waves. However, a small part of it fell on the blood vessels of every cultivator. This force was reduced by too much. Even the Golden Core disciples only trembled a little. They didn't feel too much damage. Of course, Xiao Hua knew that under this attack, other than himself and Zhong Jie, the blood vessels of the other cultivators were damaged. These blood vessels couldn't be examined by ordinary magic techniques. However, it would have a great impact on their future cultivation. Looking at the blood waves that hit the heaven and earth restriction, under the backlash of the restriction, they had already turned into countless small blood streams. The 365 blood infants had also disappeared. Gurgle, gurgle. The blood flowed lightly and calmly around the Broken Blade Ridge. The entire mountain of heaven and earth restriction was trembling violently under the moon's tears of the night. Suddenly, swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sound of wind blowing willow leaves could be heard. Xiao Hua was ecstatic. He looked over and sure enough, in the depths of the earth, small blood streams that were like strands of hair had already penetrated the heaven and earth restriction and flowed into the depths of the Broken Blade Ridge. As these strands of blood seeped in, the faint aura of the nether blood sea was faintly produced. Everyone, don't be anxious. Wait a moment. Du Peng seemed to have seen this before. He wasn't anxious. Instead, he stood there as steady as a mountain and said calmly. However, as he spoke, he looked at Zhong Jie with some worry. At this time, Zhong Jie's body was already soaked in blood. He didn't look any different from the blood infants from before. Senior, can you still hold on? Du Peng couldn't help but ask. Yi woo woo. Zhong Jie finally couldn't bear it. His wings of light fluttered and 7 rays of light were produced. Waves of hymns sounded. The originally human-shaped spiritual body gradually transformed. The impatience flower that appeared that day was born again. When the impatience flower appeared, it immediately gave off a holy brilliance. The brilliance condensed into the shape of a grape around the impatience flower, blocking the blood moon's light outside. Although Du Peng asked everyone to wait, how could Xiao Hua not be anxious? He clearly knew that in half a cup of tea's time, the bloodlight of the moon's tears would weaken. If the heaven and earth restrictions floor couldn't be enlarged before the bloodlight weakened, he was afraid that they would have to wait for the next moon sacrifice. However, looking at Du Peng's confident appearance, Xiao Hua suppressed his anxiety and waited quietly. Just as Xiao Hua expected, after half a cup of tea's time, the bloodlight of the red moon began to gradually fade. The red color was mixed with a pure white color. However, contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, when this pure white color appeared, the enormous rumbling sound became even more intense, and the blood that returned to the nether sea of blood also became extraordinarily violent. Even more blood surged from the places that had been penetrated previously, and in the blink of an eye, a rather large crack was formed. Moreover, what made Xiao Hua even more flabbergasted was that in these gaps, faint traces of devil chi gushed out. This devil chi condensed into devil patterns. They were actually black devil paths that were gradually taking shape. Needless to say, these black devil paths were the transmission tunnels that Du Peng spoke of. Everyone. Seeing the black devil paths appear, Du Peng no longer dared to hesitate and ordered, "Form a formation. According to the arrangement of the group leader, fly to different transmission tunnels." Damn it, this black devil path. How in the world is it constructed within the heaven and earth restriction? Xiao Hua looked at these black devil paths and felt more and more incredulous. While following the orders of Shui Chong and the others, he sat on the white bone flying boat and thought to himself. Senior. Du Peng quietly took out the blood-red robe from before and handed it to Zhong Jie. You can take it first. If you can enter the transmission tunnel, you can throw it away casually. But if you can't enter, then you should wear this blood-red robe. Whether this junior can safely pass through the transmission tunnel depends on senior. Zhong Jie's figure was still in the shape of a phoenix flower, and his tone was still cold. What does your death have to do with me? Even if I die, I won't wear this blood-red robe. I don't mind telling you the truth. I'm already regretting my decision to work with you. You've killed countless living beings over the past 1,000 years just to open up the teleportation tunnel. Although I'm not from the human tribe, I can't tolerate you going against the rules. Perhaps I'll change my mind and kill you immediately after we pass through the Wuming mountain range. Hearing Zhong Jie's words, Du Peng wasn't afraid at all. He smiled and said, Senior is right. From Senior's point of view, I can't be forgiven. But Senior, don't forget that I'm a demon. In my eyes, humans are just food. When I refine my own food, I hurt Daymeld or something. Senior, what reason do you have to kill this junior? Hee. If it was before, Zhong Jie might have been speechless. But now, Zhong Jie laughed and said, of course, I won't make things difficult for you. But, he will definitely not let you go. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please subscribe to it at Chijian, vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, collect it, and reward it. Chapter 50-29. Him. Zhong Jie had already said such ambiguous words several times. Today, he actually pointed out him. Du Peng suddenly realized and asked in surprise, who is he? Zhong Jie smiled. His smile was as bright as the flower of a phoenix. He looked at the thousands of bone-flying boats and said, perhaps, you will know soon. Although Zhong Jie did not say who he was, Du Peng could tell from Zhong Jie's expression that he must be a cultivator at the same level as Zhong Jie. And if there was no accident, he must be a Taoist disciple. Du Peng thought of many things in an instant, but he could not find any flaws. He did not know where he had exposed himself. He secretly cursed, damn it. He began to plan again. This time, he must take the risk to enter the Lost Land. He must not appear in the Yilin continent again. When Du Peng made his decision, the flying boat that Xiao Hua and the others were on had already fallen into the gurgling blood river under Shui Chong's control. Similar to what Xiao Hua thought, this white bone flying boat was definitely not an ordinary soul tool. It was also not as simple as it was when they practiced in the air. When everyone sat down on the white bones, Shui Chong gave a few orders. Everyone activated their magic treasures and the white bone flying boat gradually floated up. However, the white bone flying boat did not rush into the broken restriction under the cutting blade ridge. Instead, It flew into the distance. After flying for several hundred feet, it suddenly soared into the sky. After flying for several thousand feet, it turned the boat around. The whole flying boat spun rapidly and rushed into the ground under the Wuming mountain range. At this time, Shiqing's light smoke rope was activated again. It easily broke the restriction of the 5 elements and penetrated deep into the ground. What was special was that the demonic crimson button activated by Shu Liuyu now had a strange demonic mark. This demonic mark not only firmly bound Xiao Hua and the others on the white bones, but also gradually elongated as it spun. Xiao Hua and the others sat on the flying boat and saw that the nearby mountain rocks and sand were getting bigger and bigger. The small blood river in the distance now looked like a monstrous river. They already understood that the demonic crimson button had the effect of shrinking. The white bone flying boat was now not much bigger than the mountain rocks next to it. The white bone flying boat plunged straight into the blood river, splashing up waves several feet high. Without waiting for the flying ship to stop, hundreds of blood devils emerged from the demonic chi. These blood devils opened their bloody mouths and devoured the blood in the river. In just a few moments, the demonic chi was overflowing with blood, and the entire flying ship was dyed in a blood-red color. After the blood demon swallowed the blood, the bone boat quickly came to a stop. Then, before the bone boat floated up, Shui Chong hurriedly said, "Seniors, this junior won't say anything unnecessary. Now that we've entered the blood river, we're still some distance away from the heaven and earth restriction. Although the heaven and earth restriction has been torn apart by the blood river, the restriction's remaining power is still there. Whether we can break through the restriction and enter the teleportation tunnel will depend on your efforts." "Haha, well said, well said." Poison Stone Monk laughed heartily. Previously, this old man has traveled countless times in the Yilin continent, and has seen countless dangerous situations and unimaginable methods. However, this old man has never felt as inconceivable as today. Since we've already come this far, this old man has already put life and death behind him. This old man just wants to see what the teleportation tunnel that your Fuyu Immortal Alliance has constructed in the Wumeng mountain range looks like, and whether it can make this old man's eyes light up again. "Haha, well said, senior." Shui Chong also laughed heartily. How did he look like someone who had been possessed by a demon? He shouted, "Then let's all work hard together, and let the other fellow Taoists see how we'll be the first to break through the teleportation tunnel." "Of course, senior, please don't worry. Although this junior hasn't entered the teleportation tunnel before, since the preparations to enter the tunnel are so difficult, the situation inside can't be bad, right? Charge." Shu Liuyu opened her mouth and shouted a word. Instantly, the white bone flying boat's demon chi surged, and its speed increased a bit. "Don't be hasty, don't be hasty." Shui Chong was slightly stunned, and then he said with a smile, "Special Envoy has already said that at this moment, the 10 of us are one person, and we only need to talk about cooperation, and there's no need to flaunt our strength. Fellow Taoists, this junior dares to command again, and success or failure depends on this one move." "Well said, well said." Shiqing also urged, "Hurry up and give the order, don't let the others take the lead." Then, Shui Chong gave the order in an orderly manner. The white bone flying boat was surrounded by demon chi, and layers of blood-red light turned into streamers. Inside the demon chi, the windy wheel, the thunder roar paddle, the wood spirit wings, and the light smoke puppet were all activated, and when the speed gradually increased, the white bone flying boat turned into a blood-red stream, and rushed toward the heaven and earth confinement of the broken blade ridge along the blood-red stream. In less than half a cup of tea's time, a huge green stream appeared in front of the stream of blood. This green stream was like a mountain blocking the stream of blood, and it seemed to be unbreakable. When the blood stream rushed to this place, it was blocked, and waves rose to the sky. The waves made a loud rumbling sound, and suddenly turned back, and a powerful force interacted chaotically here. In particular, the blood stream contained the power of bloodline and the power of reincarnation, and the green stream contained the power of confinement and the power of backlash. These forces were more powerful than the pure waves. Not only did they cause inexplicable fluctuations, but at the same time, they also tore the void. Since the void was torn, there was the power of space coming out to cause trouble, and it just so happened that amidst these chaotic forces, within the dark green restriction, there was a spatial teleportation force that was quietly waiting for the familiar demonic chi to arrive amidst the chaos. Xiao Hua quietly released the demon chi, but just as the demon chi escaped from the demon red button's demon chi, a hollow sound immediately appeared in the nearby space, and a burst of collapsing force was born. Moreover, the green stream of light that was condensed like a mountain rock also had signs of falling down. Xiao Hua was aghast. He knew that his demon chi was too powerful, and destroyed the balance here. He hurriedly withdrew the demon chi, and just as the demon chi was released and withdrawn, the white bone flying boat had already rushed in front of the green barrier. Above the light smoke, a light cloud suddenly rose, and just as it came in contact with the green barrier, it immediately penetrated inside. Ka. The barrier very naturally gave birth to ripples. These ripples made a strange sound, and cut off the light cloud. However, without waiting for the light cloud to disappear, the demon red button's demon chi and bloodlight came in an unending stream, and submerged the ripples. Boom boom boom. Just as the demon chi submerged the ripples, the entire barrier was suffused with a dense green color, as if the entire barrier was falling, and the demon chi and bloodlight were destroyed. However, at this moment, the white bone flying boat's bow pierced into the green barrier, and then, boom. Behind the white bone flying boat, the impact of the blood river, the bloodline power in the blood river, and the power of reincarnation came, pushing the white bone flying boat into the green barrier. Great. Seeing this, Shui Chong couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice, "It's a success." However, the sky was unpredictable. Inside the green barrier, the demon chi of the black demon path had already begun to turn into a ring shape, and was rolling towards the white bone flying boat. Boom boom boom. The entire barrier suddenly roared like a tsunami, and all the green color collapsed like water. The demon chi of the black demon path was annihilated by the pressure, and the crack near the white bone flying boat suddenly squeezed, and the entire white bone flying boat was stuck in the crack. Moreover, the white bone flying boat turned into a concave shape under the huge pressure, and an unparalleled heavy pressure slashed down like a giant blade. Not good. Shi-Ching and the others turned pale with fright, and shouted, "Our lives are over." And Shui Chong exclaimed, "What? Could it be that there are also high-level cultivators breaking the restriction?" Xiao Hua's heart moved. He knew that this was the collapse caused by Zhong Jie entering the transmission tunnel, and he was also nervous. After all, his strength was not inferior to Zhong Jie's at this time. However, at this critical moment, he didn't have time to think too much. The soul sword that had been accumulating power for a long time broke through the air, and it really hit the green barrier. Boom! The barrier where the soul sword landed was immediately split open, and countless rings of demon chi gushed out from the black demon path, covering the white bone flying boat all of a sudden. It was as if a big hand was exerting force in front of its head. Whoosh! The white bone flying boat broke through the barrier and broke into the transmission tunnel. Then, the white bone flying boat shook in the black demon path and immediately disappeared. As for behind the white bone flying boat, boom! The cracks in the barrier collapsed together, and countless chaotic forces tore one after another. The blood river was once again blocked outside the green restriction of heaven and earth. Although it was called a transmission tunnel, the white bone flying boat suddenly rushed out of the pitch-black black demon path like a white horse. When Xiao Hua's eyes lit up and he saw the situation around him clearly, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air again, and secretly cried out in his heart, How is this possible? The black demon path only teleported for a moment, how could it be here? Back to Zhong Jie, seeing that most of the white bone flying boats had rushed into the blood river, she frowned again. Looking at Du Peng, who was not panicking at all, she asked, "When do we set off?" Reporting to Senior, "We can set off at any time." Although Du Peng answered very elegantly, he was still muttering in his heart, calculating where he had exposed himself. "Lead the way, let's go," Zhong Jie urged without hesitation. "Senior, please." As Du Peng spoke, a thick demon chi appeared around his body. His handsome human skin was quickly drowned by the demon chi, and an ugly demon with strength close to a demon commander appeared from the demon chi. Mph. Zhong Jie snorted coldly, somewhat surprised by Du Peng's growth in strength. However, This surprise only lasted for a moment. Even if Du Peng was a demon king, he was still an ant in Zhongjie's eyes. Zhongjie didn't care about Du Peng at all. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to Chidian to subscribe to support, vote for a monthly vote for a recommendation vote, bookmark, reward, and thank you for all forms of support. The other chapters will be updated at night. Chapter 50-30. Du Peng returned to his demonic form, but he was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he took out a blood-red robe from the demonic qi. It was similar to the one he gave Zhongjie. When Du Peng put it on, the robe turned into a net and fell into the demonic qi. The demonic king's aura quickly retracted, and in just a few breaths, Du Peng's aura was hidden to the level of a demon general. Senior. Du Peng asked in a hoarse voice, if you have a secret technique to hide your strength, please use it as soon as possible. Otherwise, with your strength, this restriction will definitely not allow you to pass. Even if you force your way in, the transmission tunnel will collapse. Got it. Zhongjie was a little impatient. Then, she broke free from the impatience flower and retracted the 7 layers of light feathers. With each layer retracted, the holy light dimmed a little. When there was only 1 layer left, the holy light was as thin as a piece of paper. Zhongjie hesitated for a moment because the last layer of light feathers was stained with mottled blood. She really did not want to retract the blood into her spiritual body, so, she impatiently urged, let's go. Okay. Du Peng sensed that Zhongjie's aura had been concealed by 90% and knew that this was her limit. He did not dare to say anything more. His figure flashed, and like a white bone-flying boat, he flew toward the blood river in the depths of the earth. Zhongjie knew that Du Peng wanted to borrow the power of the blood river, so she did not have any doubts. She did not spread her wings and followed him. At this time, although there was a lot of blood, there was still not much that gathered together. Du Peng had to use his demonic technique to shrink his body and fall into the blood river. When Du Peng's demonic body came into contact with the blood, it immediately emitted a gurgling sound. Countless bubbles gushed out from his body. When these bubbles fell into the blood river, they transformed into numerous demons that greedily devoured the blood. Zhongjie's spiritual body also shrank and landed behind Du Peng. However, on the surface of her body, there were olive-shaped fine lines. These fine lines bulged with holy light, blocking the blood light. Logically speaking, the blood flowing from the Wuming mountain range and the blood flowing from Du Peng's demonic blood spiritual pearl were the bloodline power of the human race in the mortal world. They should not be able to corrode the soul of an angel. However, it seemed that the holy light on Zhongjie's body was trembling slightly. Perhaps her strength was restricted under the restriction of heaven and earth, or perhaps her injuries were triggered again. When Zhongjie felt the power of the bloodline in the blood river binding her like a rope, Du Peng was indeed like a fish swimming in the blood river, freely accumulating his power. After a while, countless forces tore through the void, and the blood river was blocked by the huge green barrier. He transmitted his voice again, Senior, I'm going to break through the shackles of the heaven and earth restriction. You just need to follow behind me. This shackle is a hurdle for ordinary cultivators, but it's nothing to you. Senior, you just need to control your strength and don't cause the transmission tunnel to collapse. I know. Zhongjie replied indifferently. He watched as the demonic aura and shadow around Du Peng turned into a spiral. He also waved his outermost light feather. Holy light flowed out from the top of his head like a stream of water and scattered into the stream of blood like a sky full of thin braids. Du Peng urged his body and directly crashed into the green barrier. Boom! With a shake, the green barrier shook as expected, and a powerful force descended from the sky. However, before the huge force landed, the black demon path inside the barrier released rings of demonic aura that enveloped Du Peng's body. Du Peng disappeared in a flash. With Du Peng's disappearance, the huge force also strangely disappeared. However, the green barrier was still shaking, and the resistance of the larger waves of the blood river and the barrier became stronger. Zhongjie naturally did not take such an obstacle to heart. She turned into light and pounced into the barrier even faster than Du Peng. Swoosh! Like a sharp awl, Zhongjie's body pierced through the barrier and fell into it. Although it was extremely easy to pierce through the barrier, Zhongjie had just touched the green barrier when a huge force several times greater than Dupeng's fell from the sky. At this moment, the demonic aura rings of the Black Demon Path also spun and pounced over. Zhongjie instinctively frowned, but she knew that this was the so-called teleportation tunnel, so she did not resist and was about to enter along with the suction force. However, at this moment, the demonic aura of the Black Demon Path began to collapse as soon as it touched Zhongjie's angelic holy light. The rings of demonic aura either retreated in fear or were destroyed in the void by the holy light. Boom, boom, boom. The Black Demon Path could not catch Zhongjie, and the power of the sky and earth immediately increased greatly. The cracks in the green barrier where Zhongjie was also trembling violently. Large patches of the barrier began to collapse, and the space within a radius of hundreds of feet began to be annihilated under the huge force. Damn it. Zhongjie naturally did not know that her spirit body was innately incompatible with the demonic aura, causing Xiao Hua and the others to be in danger. However, she still knew that she was in trouble. She cursed in a low voice and spread out her light feathers. The second layer of light feathers was about to spread out, but just as the second layer of light feathers appeared, the entire world let out an earth-shattering sound. Zhongjie was even more shocked. She immediately understood that she was in trouble, and without thinking, not only did she shrink the second layer of light feathers, but she also put the last layer of light feathers stained with blood, demonic aura, and other impurities into her body. As soon as the light feathers entered her spirit body, many impurities immediately appeared in Zhongjie's body. Sigh. Zhongjie could not help but sigh as a thought appeared in her mind. Angel of Sin, have I already taken the first step? The moment the light feathers entered her body, Zhongjie's mind was filled with thoughts, but her figure was several times faster than Du Peng's as she rushed into the collapsed Black Demon Path. Boom boom boom. The Black Demon Path was unable to withstand Zhongjie's rush and collapsed bit by bit. However, at the same time, Zhongjie's figure also slowly disappeared. After Xiao Hua escaped from the Black Demon Path, the white bone flying boat immediately expanded and returned to its original size. When Xiao Hua saw the scene in front of her, she was shocked. She saw a sea of blood that stretched as far as the eye could see. Within the sea of blood, white bones grew, and everything was revealed. The souls were either wailing or groaning, and all of them were in pain. As the sounds rose and fell, countless rays of bloody light overflowed from the sea of blood, rushed high up, and enveloped the entire world. Not only was Xiao Hua surprised, even Shui Chong and the others were stunned. They were really dumbstruck. They looked at the vast sea of blood in disbelief, and were somewhat at a loss. However, just as they were in a daze, the sea of blood suddenly quieted down. Of course, it was only a moment of silence before the entire sea of blood boiled again. Inexplicable chaotic fluctuations emerged from the sea of blood. Following these fluctuations were countless large and small whirlpools. These whirlpools spun crazily in the sea of blood, and each whirlpool emitted a huge suction force. The white bones and souls from before wailed as they were sucked into these whirlpools. The whirlpools became deeper and deeper, like lifeless eyes looking at the space of the sea of blood. Above the vortex, countless gusts of netherworld wind turned into tornadoes that rushed into the boundless sky. These tornadoes let out fierce roars like crazy horned dragons that completely messed up the space of the blood sea. After these hurricanes were born, they did not stay still, but flew in all directions. Several hurricanes swayed and pounced on the white bone flying boat where Xiao Hua and the others were. Not good. At this moment, Shui Chong finally came to his senses and shouted, "Seniors, we have already rushed into the heaven and earth restriction. The teleportation tunnel just now has already disappeared. We need to find another teleportation tunnel. Seniors, listen to this junior's command." As he spoke, everyone came back to their senses. Under Shui Chong's command, they activated their magic treasures again. The white bone flying boat paused for a moment, then broke through the waves and flew forward in the midst of the hurricanes. Xiao Hua was distracted to activate the windy wheel while thinking to himself, "That's not right. This place is deep in the Wuming mountain range, which means it's the most mysterious place in the millions of Meng mountains. We just broke through a layer of barrier. How could we reach the Netherworld Blood Sea directly? And the Netherworld Blood Sea? Isn't it under the Netherworld Palace in Hutu Stockade? If so, could it be that the other Black Demon path leads directly to Hutu Stockade? But if that's not the case, where is this Netherworld Bloodsea? Could it be that the Netherworld Bloodsea in the Wuming mountain range and the Netherworld Bloodsea in the millions of Meng mountains are not the same? This mysterious restriction of heaven and earth actually separates the two Netherworld Bloodseas? I might as well let Daoist go out and have a look. After all, this is the Netherworld Bloodsea. His body won't be restricted. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua was about to summon Daoist Witch. But just as he was about to give it a try, Xiao Hua was surprised again. Oh no. Why can't I sense any of my clones? Not only that, between heaven and earth, the suppression is even stronger. It's hundreds and thousands of times stronger than the outside. Other than my body, everything else is suppress. I can only exert Daoist magic power equivalent to the mid-late nascent soul stage. What should I do? While he was surprised, Xiao Hua looked at the white-bone flying boat again. He saw the windy wheel, thunder roar paddle, wood spirit wings, light smoke puppet, and devil red buckle. Although each of them were suppressed, the wood spirit wings were the most special. It had obviously shrunk by 80% and was not as light as before when it flew into the Bloodsea. On the contrary, this white-bone flying boat was shuttling through the Bloodsea, nimbly flying through the towering waves. It looked very natural. Naturally, Xiao Hua's soul sense was also suppressed, but he could still use it. He tried his best to release it and looked into the distance. However, he saw that the blood shadow was like smoke in the distance, and there was no end to the Bloodsea. He really didn't know where this white-bone flying ship would end. He also didn't know where the entrance to the other Black Demon path was mentioned by Shui Chong. Vote for it, vote for it, vote for it, give it as a reward, and thank you for all forms of support. Chapter 5031. Lucky. At this point, Xiao Hua was already extremely thankful for his choice and forbearance. The restrictions in the Wuming mountain range were far beyond his expectations. It was even more shocking than breaking the boundary between the two realms. He didn't dare to imagine that if he had forced Lian Feng or searched Du Peng's soul, would he have been able to reach this step? Xiao Hua released his soul sense to look behind him. Strangely enough, there were no other white-bone flying boats behind him, nor were there any human figures. Du Peng and Zhong Jie were also not among them. It was as if the 10 of them were behind the Netherworld Bloodsea. Of course, Xiao Hua didn't think that Zhong Jie couldn't enter the Bloodsea. He frowned and prepared to look at the Bloodsea. At this time, the bone airship trembled slightly and tilted. Zhong Qi. Shui Chong's anxious voice sounded. You. What's wrong? Marshal uncle. Zhong Qi's voice sounded bitter. Junior. Junior's magic power is insufficient. Damn it. Shui Chong cursed. Seeing the bone airship falling towards the Bloodsea, he hurriedly shouted, "Can't you hold on a little longer? According to the special envoy's instructions, we'll reach the second section of the tunnel in half a cup of tea's time." Feeling wronged, Zhong Qi whispered, "Junior has already tried her best." Roar. Shui Chong was furious. Demonic aura suddenly appeared on his face, but after roaring, Shui Chong suppressed his anger and shouted, "Seniors, can you give us a little more strength? We only need to hold on for half a cup of tea's time. No problem." In a life and death situation, no one dared to be careless. Even Venomous Stone let out a low cry and increased his magic power. However, as everyone's magic power increased, the suppressive force also increased. The bone-flying ship that was already descending increased its speed. Shui Chong clearly didn't expect this to happen. He hurriedly shouted, "Seniors, quickly weaken your magic power." With their magic power weakened, the bone airship's speed slowed down. However, they still couldn't stop it from falling. Poison Stone saw this and frowned. "Shui Chong, this old man's wood spirit wings are almost useless. Why don't this old man replace Zhong Qi?" Shui Chong helplessly said, "Junior has also thought about it. However, Zhong Qi has a special secret technique. She can control the bone airship, but Senior can't. Although the wood spirit wings are useless, they can still help the bone airship maintain its balance. Senior can't give up. Damn it." Seeing the Bloodsea approaching, The waves of the blood sea transformed into flying dragons. Shi could not help but shout, "Is there no other way? Are we going to be swallowed by the blood sea?" Shui Chong. Xiao Hua asked, "What are the characteristics of the teleportation tunnel? How did you find the entrance to the teleportation tunnel?" The two cultivators spoke at the same time, causing Shui Chong to not know how to answer. Shi glanced at Xiao Hua. Ancestor Yu Ji had discussed with him countless times on how to kill Xiao Hua. Therefore, Shi had long viewed Xiao Hua as a pitiful worm. Hearing Xiao Hua's rare words, Shi couldn't help but smile coldly. "Daoist Master Xiao, you can find the teleportation tunnel's entrance." Xiao Hua simply ignored him and turned his head to look at Shui Chong. Shui Chong didn't dare to be negligent. He avoided the important and dwelled on the trivial as he said to Xiao Hua, "Senior Xiao, this junior has been repeatedly instructed by Lord Special Envoy. After flying into the restriction, this junior can find as many whirlpool-like existences as possible. No matter what it will only take about the time of a meal, damn it." Hearing Shui Chong's extremely unreliable words, the Poison Stone Master became somewhat angry and shouted, "Your defeat, Immortal Alliance, is too disregarding the life I'm waiting for. How can you find the teleportation tunnel like this?" After entering the restricted space, Shui Chong was still as respectful as before, but his tone was filled with disdain. He coldly glanced at Poison Stone Guru and faintly replied, "I'll let Senior know. This is the Special Envoy's order. However, you should also take a look. This is the Blood Sea, a place that destroys everything. Even if my defeat you Immortal Alliance set up the teleportation tunnel, I'm afraid it won't be easy to fix. That place." Without waiting for Shui Chong to finish speaking, Xiao Hua pointed to the Blood Sea not far from his left and said, "There is a white bone reef in the Blood Sea. There seems to be a whirlpool-like thing on it. This is the closest. Daoist Master Xiao, your big words really make this old man admire you." Shi couldn't help but give Xiao Hua a thumbs up. Shui Chong was indeed happy. He hurriedly shouted, "Senior, are you sure? Hurry up." Xiao Hua said impatiently, "The flying boat is about to fall into the Blood Sea. If you can guarantee that this white bone flying boat won't be tainted by the Blood Sea's evil fate, you don't have to go." Yes. Shui Chong was like a drowning person who had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. He nodded with all his might and turned the flying boat towards that place. Sure enough, in just a few breaths of time, below the white bone flying boat, there was already a white bone reef less than 10 jong wide. On top of it, the black demon path emitted a ring-shaped devil chi. Damn it. Poison Stone Master grinned and shouted, "Daoist Master Xiao, I really admire you. Can you really see it?" "I can." Xiao Hua spat out a word. He looked around with some uneasiness. This was because he sensed that although the Blood Sea had already calmed down and the whirlpool and hurricane from before had already disappeared near the white bone reef, there was a warning sign that a storm was coming. An unprecedented suppressive force had already quietly emerged from the surroundings. This suppressive force was so great that it made Xiao Hua apprehensive. Xiao Hua couldn't help but ask, "Shui Chong, what's after this teleportation tunnel? Where is it?" Junior doesn't know. It was out of Shui Chong's expectation that Xiao Hua could see far. Shui Chong didn't ignore Xiao Hua's question as he replied in a respectful tone, "This junior only knows that after passing through this teleportation tunnel, we will rendezvous with the other bone airboats and follow the dispatch and command of the special envoy." As he spoke, the devil chi on the flying boat surged, and the entire flying boat began to fall. Of course, before the flying boat fell into the Blood Sea, the black demon path above the white bone reef had already emitted a huge suction force that enveloped the white bone flying boat. The white bone flying boat fell into the reef and disappeared. This time, the white bone flying boat teleported for a long time. However, when the black demon path came to an end, Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. When he saw the situation in front of him clearly, he couldn't help but be stunned again. As for Du Peng, after entering the black demon path, the devil chi around his body swelled. One by one, the twisted blood devils surged out from his body and crazily howled as they passed through the teleportation tunnel. Standing above the Blood Sea, an unparalleled suppression came out of nowhere. The devil chi around Du Peng quickly converged, and the blood-red robe that was as thin as a cicada's wing appeared again. However, Du Peng didn't have time to look around. Instead, his gaze fell on the swaying devil Qi at the exit of the black demon path, and hesitation appeared in his eyes. He knew very well that if Zhongjie wanted to pass through the barrier of heaven and earth without causing the black demon path to collapse, she had to suppress her realm and strength. It could be said that the moment Zhongjie came out of the black demon path was the moment she was at her weakest. If Du Peng wanted to launch a sneak attack, it was the best time. However, Du Peng knew even more clearly that Zhongjie was an angel of the Holy Light Realm. She was definitely not someone he could reach with his current strength. Moreover, if he wanted to pass through this mysterious suppression space, he had to rely on Zhongjie. If his sneak attack failed, not only would all his plans fail, his life would also be in danger. However, Du Peng was in a dilemma again. This Zhongjie is an angel of the Holy Light Realm. If I devour her, then I can definitely become a demon lord in the future. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Is there such an opportunity in the entire demon realm? Should I attack? Or not? Just as Du Peng was thinking, the collapse of the black demon path came. Waves of crazy spatial power rushed out. With Du Peng's current strength, how could he resist it? He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He quickly retreated and saw Zhongjie flying out of the black demon path. However, just as Zhongjie landed in the blood sea space, boom! A suppression force 10 times stronger than the one Du Peng had appeared before suddenly came crashing down. Seeing that the space around Zhongjie was distorted by the pressure, Zhongjie had no choice but to retract her wings again, and the holy light around her disappear. Boom! Even so, the suppressive force still landed on Zhongjie. Not only was Zhongjie's body sent flying in mid-air, but more of the suppressive force landed on her body. Her originally pure and holy spiritual body was now suffused with a dark red color. Seeing this, Du Peng couldn't help but urge his body. Unfortunately, before he could fly a few feet closer, Zhongjie's figure shook and broke free from the suppression. A pair of colorful eyes flashed with coldness. She looked at Du Peng and said with a smile, "Do you want to come over?" Du Peng was shocked because there was an almost irresistible bewitchment in Zhongjie's eyes. He almost told the truth. Du Peng hurriedly looked away and said in a low voice, "Of course not. I'm just afraid that you won't be able to adapt." Humph. Zhongjie snorted and said sternly, "This is the last time I'm reminding you. Don't have any thoughts of a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Otherwise, you know the consequences." Yes, I know. Zhongjie was no longer as indifferent as before. Instead, it was replaced by a kind of fierceness. Du Peng was quite uncomfortable, and his forehead was already sweating. "How do I get out of this blood sea space?" Zhongjie looked around and said coldly, "I'll let you know that this is not the real blood sea space." Du Peng hurriedly replied, "This is the blood sea created by the restriction of heaven and earth to resist the blood river wandering souls. The real blood sea is still in the depth." Humph, I know that. Zhongjie looked around, and the corner of his mouth showed a strong disdain. He replied, "I know this kind of trick very well, and I've seen a lot of it. I just didn't expect there to be such a restriction here, so I asked you how to get out of this space. In front of us is the Black Devil path left by the Devil clan." Du Peng didn't hide it. He pointed to the blood sea in the distance and said, "We just need to break through the attack of the blood sea to enter the transmission and reach the real blood sea. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please subscribe to it at Chijian, vote for it, give it a reward, and..." Chapter 5032. As she spoke, countless white bones and souls condensed from the blood sea and rushed toward Zhongjie and Du Peng. Zhongjie, on the other hand, was already used to these attacks. She only said coldly, "It's always the same method. Can't it be fresher?" Du Peng didn't know what Zhongjie meant, but from Zhongjie's tone, Du Peng could tell that Zhongjie had a card up his sleeve. Du Peng smiled and said, yes, with Senior here, this junior can rest assured. Enrich, do you still need me to deal with this kind of attack? Zhongjie ignored Du Peng and said coldly. Although his words sounded the same as before, Du Peng felt a chill run down his spine. He glanced at Zhongjie's spiritual body, which was devoid of holy light, and seemed to have understood something. He didn't dare to say anything else and hurriedly nodded. Yes, senior, please follow me. Then, Du Peng flew toward the gap of the hurricane and the edge of the whirlpool. After flying for a while, Du Peng whispered again, Senior, this blood sea space is a magic array space. Everything is under the suppression of the magic array. The strength below the nascent soul stage can't cause the suppression to backfire, but the strength above the nascent soul stage can't be revealed, even if I have the strength of an avatar. Otherwise, the suppression will. Don't worry. Before Du Peng could finish, Zhongjie said impatiently, I know more about this magic array space than you do. And don't worry, I can tell you now that I can definitely take you to the Lost Land. Ah! Du Peng couldn't believe his ears and asked curiously, Senior, are you serious? This magic array space. Hearing Zhongjie's confident tone, Du Peng did not know if it was because Zhongjie truly understood the heaven and earth restriction that kept countless Daoist cultivators out of the Lost Land, or because Zhongjie had joined the Devil Dao. Du Peng did not know if it was because Zhongjie really understood the heaven and earth restriction that kept countless Daoist cultivators out of the Lost Land, or because Zhongjie had joined the Devil Dao. Unfortunately, even if Zhongjie was possessed by the devil, her arrogance still didn't put Du Peng in her eyes. She didn't answer any of Du Peng's questions and just flew freely in the hurricane. Since Xiao Hua and the others could enter the second section of the transmission tunnel without any danger, Du Peng and Zhongjie didn't have any accidents and easily arrived at a white bone reef. As they landed, they activated the black demon path and disappeared, leaving only the bloody light behind them, the hurricane raging, and countless ghosts struggling in the whirlpool of the blood sea. Zhongjie's figure was as steady as a rock in the black demon path. When the devil chi surged and the devil patterns flashed away like mottled shadows, another magnificent sea of blood appeared in front of her eyes. Zhong's mouth, Zhongjie's eyes, blood sea of blood, as if this blood sea was not beyond her expectations. As she looked around, she saw Xiao Hua sitting on a white bone flying boat with a dumbfounded look on his face. Oh! Zhongjie was a little surprised and thought to herself, could it be that he still hasn't seen through the truth of this blood sea space? Xiao Hua naturally hadn't seen through it. Seeing that there was another blood sea outside the black demon path, he couldn't help but be stunned and groaned in his heart. Damn it, are you kidding me? Why is there another blood sea? Could it be that there's more than one nether blood sea in the Wuming mountain range? Or, thinking of this, Xiao Hua suddenly understood, and a look of sudden realization appeared on his face. I understand now. That wasn't the real netherworld blood sea, but a layer of formation created by the formation space. In order to resist the wandering souls and blood that entered the blood sea space, this blood sea was real. In other words, Du Peng and the others want to pass through this blood sea to reach the Hutu village. Haha, spiritual master Xiao. At this time, a slightly excited voice sounded from Xiao Hua's right hand. You're really lucky. Just now, Yuna asked about you. She was afraid that you wouldn't be able to pass through the barrier of the formation, so I told her the story of you leading the troops in the formation. They didn't believe me, but now it seems that I wasn't lying. Xiao Hua looked up and saw that it was Bai Fei, who was beaming with joy. At this time, he was sitting in another white bone flying ship and was transmitting his voice to him with a smile. Haha, thank you for your concern, fellow Daoist Bai. Xiao Hua smiled, looked around and asked, I wonder if fellow Daoist Zhuang and Fairy you also successfully broke through this formation space? I'm afraid it's too difficult. Bai Fei had already come in and looked for a long time. At this time, he replied, less than half of the people can enter this blood sea space, and less than half can pass through it. Now it seems that the total is less than 30%. Without releasing his soul sense, Xiao Hua casually glanced and already understood that Bai Fei was right. There were less than 100 white bone flying ships floating above the blood sea, which meant that there were less than 10,000 cultivators alive. However, before Xiao Hua could finish looking at the situation of the white bone flying ships, his gaze fell on Zhongjie's body. Zhongjie's wings of light were not spread out, and the holy light was not there. Although there was no blood-red robe on the surface of his body, strands of blood were faintly visible on his body like a spiderweb. Moreover, in the middle of these strands of blood, there was demonic chi surging out like smoke. The originally pure seven-colored eyes were now flashing with a layer of flirtatiousness. Xiao Hua saw that there was something wrong with Zhong Jie with a glance. Zhong Jie. Xiao Hua immediately transmitted his voice. You have been corroded by the blood sea? Xiao Hua's transmission contained soul power. Zhong Jie's body trembled, and he hurriedly replied, Xiao Hua, I beg you for something. Speak. Xiao Hua secretly felt that something was wrong, and asked, what is it? If I really commit a crime. Zhong Jie's voice was filled with determination. You will definitely kill me with your own hand. Xiao Hua heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. In other words, you haven't turned into a demon yet? Zhong Jie did not answer Xiao Hua, but said to himself, now in this Yilin continent, only you have the strength to kill me. Remember this, remember this. If you can't kill me, I will definitely raze the lost land to the ground. It can't be. Xiao Hua was a little surprised. You're that powerful when you turn into a demon? Of course, the power of an angel of sin far surpasses that of an angel. Zhong Jie nodded. Xiao Hua suddenly thought of the saint artifact he'd obtained in the heaven sacrificial abyss. Unfortunately, he was unable to take it out at all within this restricted space, so he smiled and said, don't be anxious. I obtained a saint artifact from your holy light world in the heaven sacrificial abyss. Once we leave this restricted space, I'll give it to you. Unfortunately, Zhong Jie was not interested in this so-called saint weapon. He smiled faintly and said, you don't understand what I'm saying at all. You also don't know what an angel of my holy light realm is. The so-called saint weapon. Zhong Jie did not finish his words. He looked up at the sky again, only to see a black mass in the sky, as if a layer of dark clouds was in the sky, and also as if the broken blade ridge was right above their head. However, no matter what it was, the pressure around everyone was even stronger than before. It was just that this black mass seemed to be blocked by something. Not to mention Zhong Jie, even Xiao Hua couldn't see through this black mass. Above their heads, they could not see through it, but the blood sea below them was very obvious. The blood waves in this blood sea were much more monstrous than before. Each wave was 100 zhong high, the whirlpools in the blood sea were less, the hurricanes in the space were also less, but the distortion in the space was even more intense, becoming more unstable. Swoosh! Another white bone flying boat rushed into the space, and Beauty Yu was sitting on it. At this moment, Beauty Yu's scarf was already torn off, revealing her flawless white skin and incomparably beautiful appearance. When Xiao Hua saw this, the eyes of the Poison Stone Venerable at the side also lit up. What a pity! The Poison Stone Venerable actually did not care about Xiao Hua, and said, Jade Fat Ancestor does not have this luck. If not for Xiao Hua being able to hear the sound transmission between the Poison Stone Venerable and Jade Fat Ancestor, he was afraid that he also would not understand the meaning of this sentence, and these words in Xiao Hua's ears gave birth to a layer of disgust towards the Poison Stone Venerable and Shiqing. Hundreds of flying boats stopped in the air, right at the edge of the blood sea. They were not affected by the hurricane. Everyone was waiting. Another smoke of cultivation technique had passed, but there were no more white bone flying boats coming in. Du Peng transmitted his voice, disciples, get ready to set up the formation. Yes. Shui Chong and the other group leaders responded, and each of them urged the white bone flying boats to close in on each other, surrounding Du Peng and Zhong Jie in the middle. Form. Du Peng ordered, and Shui Chong and the others patted the white bone flying boats. Hong hong hong. A series of explosive sounds rushed out from the white bones, and Shu Liuyu, who was controlling the demonic red button, was shocked to discover that the demonic red button was already out of her control, and the demonic rings floated out from the white bones, turning into a chain shape, and connected with each other. Ka. In the midst of the sound, the several hundred white bone flying boats actually formed a rather large demonic formation, and layers of demonic flames rushed out from the demonic rings, blocking the nearby space. Hong hong hong. Just as the demonic formation was formed, a suppressive force immediately fell from the sky, smashing on the demonic formation like thunder, and in the midst of the loud sound, the white bone demonic formation trembled a few times, but did not collapse. Good. Seeing this, Du Peng, who had been on tenterhooks all this time, could not help but clap his hands and laugh. The most dangerous moment has passed. Disciples, let us rush to the last transmission tunnel. It's still early. Zhong Jie sneered. The space of the blood sea is not as simple as you think. If you want to pass through the blood sea, Not only do you have to be meticulous, but you also have to have unparalleled luck, because as long as there is a force that is stronger than the spatial formation, the suppressive force will be multiplied. Hong. Without waiting for Zhongjie to finish, the blood sea had already confirmed his words, and an inexplicable wave of blood suddenly surged out from the blood sea, rushing toward the white bone demonic formation. Du Peng hurriedly gave orders, and thousands of disciples barely escaped from the claws of the blood wave. Then, the entire white bone demonic formation turned into the shape of a bone bird, and rushed into the blood sea, soaring in the blood wave and hurricane. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please subscribe to it at Chijian. Vote for it, vote for it, vote for it, give it a tip, and thank you for all of your support. Chapter 50-33. After flying for half an hour, the number of bones in the blood sea decreased, and the wind and waves calmed down a little. Du Peng's heart was finally at ease. He gratefully looked at Zhongjie in front of him. He knew in his heart that although this half an hour had been frightening but not dangerous, it was all thanks to Zhongjie's strength. Zhongjie seemed to know this blood sea like the back of his hand. Many times, before danger appeared, Zhongjie immediately transmitted to Du Peng, letting Du Peng prepare early, so that they could avoid danger. If it weren't for Zhongjie, this bone bird would have been defeated by the blood waves as soon as it fell into the space of the blood sea. However, Du Peng was somewhat inexplicably puzzled. That's not right. Zhongjie is an angel of the holy light realm. She, even if she was possessed, how could she be so familiar with the nether blood sea? Not to mention Du Peng, Xiao Hua was also extremely puzzled. Among the many dangers the bone bird encountered, there were many that even Xiao Hua couldn't see through. Xiao Hua couldn't imagine how Zhongjie could see through them. However, seeing that the wind and waves were calming down, Xiao Hua reminded Zhongjie, "Don't be careless. According to the time, this is the time when the moon tear disappears in the Wuming mountain range and the sacrificial night is over. The bloodline power of the soul cultivator is beginning to weaken, and the suppression power of this array is about to become stronger. Do I need you to tell me that?" Zhongjie sneered and said, "I'm not as familiar with the sealing array of the Buddha kingdom as you are." Hearing this, Xiao Hua was stunned and asked curiously, What did you say?" This is the sealing array of the Buddha kingdom." While Xiao Hua was in a daze, the world suddenly calmed down. The bones in the blood sea disappeared, the souls died, and the previous rolling waves strangely calmed down. Of course, this calm only lasted for a moment. Woo-woo. Various wind sounds were produced one after another. In the blood sea, strange figures condensed one after another, like men and women, like men and beasts. Could it be that they were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws? They flew out fiercely. The man was extremely ugly and fierce. The woman was extremely beautiful and charming. The beast was a flying dragon in the sky. The beast was a great rock spreading its wings. It was extremely fierce. Not only that, but the flying dragon, the great Peng, the male Azura, and the female Rakshasa actually broke free from the sea of blood and rushed towards Xiao Hua and the others, instantly trapping the flying bone bird. Damn it! Seeing this situation, Xiao Hua couldn't help but groan and shout, "Damn it! This was the Buddhist kingdom's sea of bitterness. It wasn't a soul cultivator's netherworld blood sea. This Xiao was mistaken from the start." Just as Xiao Hua's groan fell, swish. In the dark sky, light suddenly shone brightly, and rays of Buddhist light that were as heavy as mountains tore apart the layers of dark clouds. At this moment, Xiao Hua could clearly see that the dark clouds were blood-colored clouds. These clouds were in the shape of a full moon, exactly the same as moon tear. Needless to say, the power of moon tear and the blessing of Hutu had temporarily blocked the Buddhist formations sealing the Wuming mountain range and the Million mountain range, giving the soul cultivators a chance to escape. Unfortunately, the ones who seized this opportunity were neither the soul cultivators nor the cultivators of the human race, but the devil generals of the demon race. The flying dragon and great Peng in the sea of blood crazily attacked the bone birds condensed from white bones. Every bone-flying boat trembled violently. At this time, the Buddhist light smashed down like a mountain, 100 times more powerful than the sea of blood. Boom! With a loud bang, the white bone demon formation collapsed, and the bone birds were torn apart. Hundreds of bone-flying boats tumbled in the sky above the sea of blood. What was special was that when the demon formation collapsed, the great Peng also turned into ashes, and all the cultivators sitting on the bone-flying boats were sent flying. Xiao Hua's figure tumbled in the air, but his eyes were looking at the source of the Buddhist light. After the blood-colored clouds disappeared, the mountain-like light revealed its true appearance. Wasn't it an out-and-out mountain? It was just that this mountain went straight up, without any twists and turns. The mountain was lush with fragrant trees, the four sides of the mountain protruded, and there were the palaces of the four heavenly kings, and the base of the mountain was pure gold sand. This mountain was divided into 3 levels, upper, middle, and lower 7 treasure steps. On both sides of the path were 7 layers of treasure walls, 7 layers of railings, 7 layers of nets, and 7 layers of trees. The doors, walls, windows, railings, trees, and so on were all made of gold, silver, crystal, colored glass, and so on. Flowers and fruits were flourishing, fragrant winds were everywhere, and countless strange birds were singing together, and ghosts and gods lived in it. This familiar mountain, the only mountain in the world. Wasn't it Mount Meru hanging in the center of the 4 continents? Wasn't it Mount Meru that Xiao Hua saw in the ruins of the Buddhist sect? How did the disappeared Mount Meru appear here? Xiao Hua's face was pale, and he seemed to understand something. In addition to being surprised, he secretly felt bad. Xiao Hua suddenly knew where his previous warning came from. Sure enough, under the suppression of Mount Meru, how could the demon race run wild? Countless sealed Buddhist light fell like a waterfall, smashing into the bodies of all the cultivators at almost the same time. Aoo, aoo. Waves of anguished howls came from the left and right of Xiao Hua. One by one, the humans who had been possessed by the demon race revealed their demon bodies, and these demon bodies were easily erased by the innate restraining Buddhist light. Similarly, waves of blood-curdling screams were also heard. Poison Stone Master, Shi Qing, and the other nascent soul cultivators who were full of evil also received retribution from this Buddhist light. Wherever the Buddhist light fell, the nascent soul cultivators' bodies burst open, and their nascent souls melted. Without any resistance, they all fell into the sea of blood and disappeared without a trace. Xiao Hua was naturally no exception. Wherever the Buddhist light fell, he was also beaten until he was rolling. With the strength of his shaman body, he was not afraid of being injured. Xiao Hua was like this, so Zhong Jie was even more unafraid. A pair of light wings slightly spread out, just enough to cover Du Peng. When the Buddhist light fell on the light wings, it only made the light wings tremble. Ever since Zhong Jie entered the space of the Sea of Blood, he had already seen through the foundation of the Buddhist kingdom's seal. The sacred light realm was the mortal enemy of the Buddhist kingdom. How could she not have the means to resist this sealing Buddhist light? However, what Xiao Hua did not know was that when the Buddhist light fell on his shaman body, the entire Mount Meru trembled. Not only did the Sea of Blood set off waves of blood, even the Buddhist light of Mount Meru became 10 times brighter. It was as if Mount Meru had discovered the secret of Xiao Hua's shaman body. Even when the waves of blood rushed out, it had already blocked Zhong Jie and Du Peng from everyone's sight. However, Xiao Hua did not notice this abnormality. He was looking at Bai Fei and Yi Yun with concern. Although Xiao Hua disdained Bai Fei's selfishness, Bai Fei was after all a human cultivator. Moreover, he was also sincere towards Yi Yun. Xiao Hua did not want this pair of lovers to fall in the sea of bitterness under Mount Meru. However, this Buddhist light fell too strangely. When Xiao Hua looked over, Bai Fei had just produced layers of golden scales on the surface of his body, barely blocking the Buddhist light for Yi Yun. Just as the two of them were rolling helplessly in the Buddha's light, another layer of Buddha's light arrived. The Buddha's light did not fall, but an unparalleled pressure arrived first. The golden scales on Bai Fei's body cracked. Bai Fei cried out in a daze, "Senior, save me." Oh! Xiao Hua was stunned, thinking that Bai Fei was calling him. However, the strange thing was that Bai Fei was not looking at Xiao Hua, but Du Peng. Unfortunately, Du Peng and Zhong Jie were blocked by the waves of blood at this time. There was no trace of them at all. Could it be that Bai Fei has been colluding with Du Peng for a long time? Xiao Hua's suspicions had just arisen. Boom! A pair of pure white feathers of light suddenly flashed out from behind Bai Fei. Although these feathers of light looked a little immature, they were tenacious in the Buddhist light and actually supported Bai Fei's body. Bai Fei, save me. Seeing that Bai Fei still had a mysterious trick up his sleeve, Yi Yun, whose face was already filled with despair, immediately cried out. However, out of Yi Yun's expectations, Bai Fei's gaze swept past Yi Yun indifferently. He did not even reach out his hand. The light feathers suddenly flashed and he turned around and rushed to the other side of the sea of blood. Bai. Yi Yun was stunned. She looked at Bai Fei's cold back in disbelief and cried out a heart-wrenching word. Her chest felt as if it was blocked and she could no longer breathe. Seeing that the murderous Buddhist light had already landed on top of Yi Yun's head. Little Yi, don't panic. At this critical moment, when Xiao Hua was also defeated by Bai Fei's ruthless attack, a hoarse and weak voice came from the edge of the sea of blood. Ji Yu, whose body was already damaged, flew out like a ghost. On Ji Yu's left arm, the strange blood pattern appeared again. His left arm turned into a tiger claw and slashed through the air, blocking the Buddhist light that was about to kill Yi Yun. At this time, half of the golden crown on Ji Yu's head was still left. Boom! With a soft sound, Ji Yu's left arm was crushed by the Buddhist light and broke inch by inch. Yi Yun's body was also swept by the Buddhist light and tumbled into the sea of blood. How could Ji Yu bear to see Yi Yun die? He tried his best to urge his broken body to catch Yi Yun. Unfortunately, things did not go as he wished. Ji Yu's fingers had just touched Yi Yun's fingers when the two had already brushed past each other. However, in Yi Yun's desperate eyes, there was a trace of joy. Her lips moved a few times. Ji Yu. These two words were not spat out. Damn it. Xiao Hua was enraged. Facing the two infatuated man and woman who were about to die, he could no longer hold himself back. He cursed in a low voice and his shaman body expanded. An aura that was as strong as Mount Meru swept across the sea of blood. Those two hands that were stronger than mountains grabbed Ji Yu and Yi Yun. Xiao Hua. Seeing the surge of aura and Zhong Jie's figure appearing from behind the sea of blood, she cried out in shock, "How can you?" Without waiting for Zhong Jie to finish his words, Mount Meru seemed to topple over. The entire Buddhist light phantom fell with a loud bang and actually imprisoned the entire sea of blood. Go! Zhong Jie shouted. The 7 layers of light feathers hidden in his spiritual body all came out. His left hand grabbed Du Peng's neck and his entire body rushed to the other side of the sea of blood like a stream of light. If it was not for Xiao Hua's supreme wizard body, Zhong Jie would definitely not be able to fly across the sea of blood. However, now that Mount Meru was suppressing Xiao Hua with all its might, how could it care about Zhong Jie? Angel Zhong Jie actually took the opportunity to sweep across the sea of blood before the power of imprisonment spread throughout the sea of blood. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Chijian and support it. Vote for it, vote for it, vote for it, give it as a reward, and thank you for all forms of support. Chapter 5034. It had to be said that Bai Fei was a person with great fortune. As soon as he rushed out of the blood waves, he felt an incomparable power coming from behind him. He was very familiar with this power. Bai Fei was overjoyed. Before he could turn around, Zhong Jie's voice had already appeared in his ears. Don't move, I'll take you out. Thank you, senior. Thank you, senior. Bai Fei was overjoyed and repeatedly shouted, thank you, senior, for saving this junior again. Chimpage. Unfortunately, what greeted Bai Fei was only a cold snort from Zhong Jie. Then, he felt a pain in his neck and his whole body swept across the blood sea like a feather. The scene of Bai Fei abandoning Yi Yun was not only seen by Xiao Hua, but also by Zhong Jie. Although Zhong Jie was not a human, he did not like Bai Fei who was so heartless. Senior. Du Peng did not pay attention to Zhong Jie's rescue of Bai Fei. He knew that he was not out of danger yet and also knew what he had to do. He only stared at the edge of the blood sea in the distance without blinking. Seeing that he was getting closer and the terrifying sealing power behind him was chasing after him, he hurriedly pointed at a place and shouted, "That place, quick, it's that place." Zhong Jie's figure was like a ray of light as he rushed towards the place Du Peng pointed at. A demonic ring of the black demon path rushed out from that place and enveloped Zhongjie's body of light. Rumble. As expected, the black demon path collapsed again and disappeared with Angel Zhongjie, Demon General Du Peng, and the human Bai Fei. Before Zhongjie entered the black demon path, he turned his head and saw that Mount Meru had already descended out of thin air and completely suppressed Xiao Hua's previous location. Zhongjie's heart turned cold. He understood that this Sumeru mountain was the core of the entire Buddhist formation. Even if Xiao Hua was an immortal, he wouldn't be able to resist such a suppressive force. Even if he was an immortal, he wouldn't be able to resist it. Even if he was in Xiao Hua's position, he would be instantly turned into ashes. Hence, Xiao Hua had no chance to escape. What a pity for an immortal who was about to ascend. Zhongjie sighed for a human, which was rare. He entered the black demon path with doubts. I don't know why he insisted on staying in the human world. Of course, Xiao Hua was reluctant to let his enemies, Yi Yun and Shu Ji, die in the sea of bitterness. His powerful wizard physique aura surged around him as he held the two of them in his hands. However, in reality, when the Buddha's light fell on Xiao Hua's supreme wizard physique, the most powerful attack of Mount Meru had already begun to accumulate power. Now, when it struck out of nowhere, it was as if the entire 3,000 sectors were crashing down. Its power was even greater than the collapse of the sky, the collapse of the earth, and the annihilation of space. It was just as Zhongjie had thought. Not to mention Xiao Hua, even if Shu Ji and Fairy Xingyue were here, they would not be able to escape. However, Xiao Hua didn't want to give up because there was still love in his heart and responsibility on his shoulders. He didn't hesitate to activate the going south, going north technique. He wanted to teleport out of this strongest seal that he had never encountered before. As soon as the Soul Cultivator's escape technique was used, Mount Meru became even angrier. Rays of Buddha's light, like roaring dragons, rushed out from the sea of blood, from the void, from the top of his head, and from the seal. They surrounded the entire space like an iron wall. Xiao Hua's figure couldn't even move a single step, let alone teleport. Even Xiao Hua's gaze was blocked and suppressed by this Buddha's light. However, the strange thing was that at the same time as the going south, going north technique was used, the light and shadows around Xiao Hua rose again. The roaring dragons turned into pieces of light. This light carried compassion, majesty, warmth, and even an aura of freedom. Wasn't this the strange phenomenon that Xiao Hua saw when he used the escape technique? Xiao Hua didn't hesitate at all. His figure flashed and he immediately escaped into a piece of light. The scene before Xiao Hua's eyes instantly changed. The sea of blood was gone, the suppression was gone, and there were only rays of light and shadows. There was also a light path leading to an unknown place. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He knew that as long as he stepped into the light path, he should be able to use the escape technique and escape from Mount Meru's suppression. However, Xiao Hua's ecstasy only lasted for a moment. Because at this moment, a myriad of chaotic fluctuations appeared in the light path. Not only did they tear apart the rays of light and shadows, they even cut off most of the light path. Needless to say, these fluctuations were the power of Mount Meru's seal and suppression. As the saying goes, fortune doesn't come in pairs. Misfortune doesn't come alone. Before Xiao Hua could truly step into the light path to escape, his shaman body trembled, and he escaped from the light path again. Xiao Hua sighed. He looked at Ji Yu and Yi Yun in his two big hands and smiled bitterly in his heart. If I put these two into the space, Xiao Hua can naturally escape using the escape technique. But if I bring these two along, how can Xiao Hua hide in the light? Unless Xiao Hua throws these two into the sea of bitterness right now. Xiao Hua wasn't Bai Fei. Even though Ji Yu and Yi Yun weren't his relatives, he still couldn't abandon them. Therefore, Xiao Hua had no choice but to abandon the escape technique. 3 corpses yin lightning instantly surged around his body and he escaped towards the bottom of the sea of bitterness. Boom boom boom. Huge rumbling sounds were emitted from the bottom of Mount Meru. The originally shaking space started to tremble even more. Since Xiao Hua had already used all of his strength naturally exceeded the 9th grade of origin energy. But even so, he only escaped a few feet away and couldn't move forward anymore. How could Xiao Hua of the mortal world escape from the seal of Mount Meru's Buddhist kingdom and the suppression of the 3,000 great worlds? Truly, one careless move and the whole game is loss. Seeing Mount Meru descending from the sky, Xiao Hua sighed with emotion. If I came in at that time and restored the golden Buddha statue of Nanwu Guanyin Bodhisattva, how could I be in such a predicament? But now, under the suppression, my Niwen palace is sealed. Not only can Maitreya Buddha not come out, even Xiao Hua's Buddhist consciousness and soul power can't be used. Xiao Hua's sigh could only be seen as the boniness of reality, the fullness of an ideal, because the reason Xiao Hua could enter the sea of bitterness was because of the power of Moon Tear. The soul cultivator's netherworld sea of blood was similar to the Buddhist kingdom's sea of bitterness. The power of Moon Tear turned the sea of bitterness into the netherworld sea of blood, which led to Xiao Hua's misunderstanding. But thinking about it again, even if Xiao Hua restored the golden Buddha statue of Nanwu Guanyin Bodhisattva at that time, under the power of Moon Tear, would he be able to enter the barrier of the seal on the white bone flying boat? Perhaps he would have already been killed by the bloody light outside the barrier, right? Below Mount Meru was the place where the soul cultivator and the Buddhist kingdom fought to the death. One could only choose between the shaman body and the golden Buddha statue. Since Xiao Hua chose the shaman body and obtained the qualifications to enter the sea of bitterness, the outcome of being suppressed was already unavoidable. Xiao Hua already knew the outcome, but his heart was still unwilling. He saw the space above his head collapse and Mount Meru, which was enough to smash everything into ashes, fell down. His gaze fell on the crystal skull on his right hand's finger. Doesn't the Shaman King have the divine connection technique? Xiao Hua's eyes turned rapidly and he secretly said, could it be that this Mount Meru is something that I can't think of? While thinking, the remaining 3 corpses yin lightning on the surface of Xiao Hua's body rushed into the Shaman King's command. At the place where the lightning fell, the dark green shadow inside the crystal skull suddenly seemed to come alive and rushed out rapidly. That crystal skull instantly turned into a fuzzy human head. Roar! A deep roar came from the mouth of the human head. Soon after, the human head broke free from Xiao Hua's right hand and turned into a bloody light that pounced into the sea of bitterness below. However, the human head didn't fall into the sea of bitterness. Boom! With a loud sound, the human head exploded and turned into bloody light that scattered everywhere in the sea of blood. When the bloody light appeared, the sea of bitterness's bloody waves immediately surged up. An inconceivably powerful bloodline power soared into the sky. Not only did the bloody waves cover Xiao Hua's shaman body, the bloodline power even blocked Mount Meru in midair. Of course, under the Buddhist kingdom's Mount Meru, this powerful bloodline power merely appeared for a moment. However, it was precisely during this moment that Mount Meru fell again. Within the bloody waves, Xiao Hua's figure had already mysteriously disappeared without a trace. Boom! Mount Meru fell into the sea of bitterness with unstoppable momentum. As the bloody waves rolled, the white bone flying ship that was destroyed by the Buddhist light, the remains of the human and demon race, and everything else turned into powder and no longer existed in this whirl. Buzz buzz buzz. Mount Meru killed everything and once again let out a rumbling sound as it flew high into the sky. Under its might, it once again brought about a boundless bloody wave. And within this bloody wave, a silver ball of light that was only a few feet in size appeared in the bloody wave again. Above this silver ball of light, immortal chi faintly seeped out. A silver-white little wolf's face carried incomparable fear as it watched Mount Meru rise. Isn't this the wolf race's beauty, you? Damn it! The silver wolf cursed in a low voice. What the hell is going on? There is actually the Buddhist kingdom's Mount Meru here, and that human Xiao Hua is actually such a powerful cultivator. I actually pretended to be a human in front of him for so long. Presumably, he has already seen through my true appearance, right? However, fortunately, this human called Daoist Master Xiao is still considered benevolent. He did not expose me, nor did he kill me like the other humans. However, I used the immortal talisman bestowed by the Snow Wolf King. How can I capture the little fox and return to the 10,000 demon realm? Oh, not good. The immortal talisman used by the silver wolf race was naturally bestowed by the human form with the surname Shun. This immortal talisman was originally unable to resist Mount Meru, but the focus of Mount Meru was on Xiao Hua, which allowed the silver wolf race and even Zhong Jie to easily escape. At this time, Xiao Hua disappeared, and Mount Meru naturally discovered the existence of the immortal talisman. Without waiting for Mount Meru to rush into the sky, an unparalleled suppressive force pounced on the silver wolf race. Under the fear, how could the silver wolf race not cry out? However, when the silver wolf race looked around, she was surprised to find that at this time, she had already reached the edge of the Blood Sea. Wasn't the black demon path beside her? The silver wolf race did not even think about it. Her demon body jumped out of the immortal talisman recklessly and pounced on the black demon path. Shua! The silver wolf race's figure disappeared into the black demon path, and the suppressive force burst in. Catcher! In the trembling sound, the black demon path collapsed inch by inch and followed the silver wolf race. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to the starting point to subscribe to support, vote a monthly vote, vote a recommendation vote, collect a gift. Thank you for all forms of support. Chapter 5035. Lian Feng, the Alliance Master of the Defeat You Immortal Alliance, was very ambitious. Du Peng even had ulterior motives. It had been almost 1,000 years since Du Peng met Zhong Jie in the Yilan continent, and since Xiao Hua waved the parameter twice to send Shui and helplessness into the dark side of the space. In the past 1,000 years, how many people of the Wuming mountain range had Du Peng sacrificed? Moreover, the Defeat Immortal Alliance finally gathered thousands of nascent soul and gold core disciples who were qualified to pass through the heaven and earth restriction formation. Du Peng also prepared carefully and added tens of thousands of humans who were possessed by the devil race. This was a total of 50,000 cultivators, plus the Holy Light Angel Zhong Jie and the Supreme Master of the human race, Xiao Hua. At this moment, only Zhong Jie, Du Peng, Bai Fei, and the Silver Wolf clan had escaped. Xiao Hua, Ji Yu, and Yi Yun's fate was unknown, and the rest of the human race, devil race, and monster race had been annihilated. The dangers of going to the Lost Lands were obvious. No wonder Long Shenzi, Old Man Jiu Qiong, and the other Dao sect sovereigns didn't dare to come and help even though they knew that Xiao Hua was the savior of the world. It was because they knew that entering the Lost Lands was equivalent to death. In fact, if it weren't for the devil race, Du Peng might not have come in person. Wasn't the ambitious Lian Feng the same? Bai Fei, who was doomed to die, was saved twice by the angel Zhong Jie in the Wuming mountain range. How could Xiao Hua, who had the fate of the human race as his meridians, be in trouble? The Shaman King token turned into a piece of blood, and an incomparable bloodline power soared into the sky, temporarily blocking Mount Meru. A small whirlpool suddenly appeared in the wave of blood that covered Xiao Hua. The whirlpool was pitch black, and it led straight to the bottom of the Sea of Bitterness. A netherworld energy that Xiao Hua was familiar with seeped out from this whirlpool. This netherworld energy was even stronger than the bloodline power from before, and it was like a large hand that grabbed Xiao Hua. With a woo sound, Xiao Hua was not allowed to struggle, and he was immediately dragged to the bottom of the Sea of Bitterness. What kind of power is this? Xiao Hua's heart moved as he cried out in disbelief. Could it be that there's really an ancient great god being suppressed under Mount Meru? Xiao Hua's figure descended like lightning. The situation of the Sea of Bitterness changed again. First, it was the surging of waves of blood, followed by layers of flames. Countless little ghosts and countless human figures of men and women appeared. The little ghosts pried open the human figures' mouths, clamped their tongues with iron pincers, and pulled them out forcefully. They did not pull them out all at once, but rather, they stretched them out and pulled them out slowly. After that, there was the sound of sharp blades. Countless little ghosts held strange torture instruments in their hands, and were cutting off the fingers of some men and women. 10, 18 levels of hell? Xiao Hua was inexplicably startled. This Xiao, could it be that I still haven't escaped the suppression of Mount Meru and will be sent to the 18th layer of hell? After that, the miserable state of the hell of trees of steel, the hell of mirrors of retribution, the hell of steamers, the hell of bronze pillars, the hell of icebergs, and so on and so forth entered Xiao Hua's eyes, and the shrill cries of those men and women resounded incessantly. After an unknown period of time, with a loud boom, the netherworld energy enveloping Xiao Hua's body suddenly disappeared. The strange realm that was originally outside the path of power even pounced over like flowing light and shadow. Woo! After the strange whistling of the wind, an unbearable heat emerged from Xiao Hua's surroundings. Volcanoes that were shrouded in smoke appeared in front of Xiao Hua's eyes again. However, these volcanoes flickered with dark red flames. Amidst the loud boom boom boom, countless magma and gravel soared into the sky. They either smashed into various places in the space or rushed towards Xiao Hua's shaman body. Every gravel carried the power to destroy heaven and earth, and every stream of magma seemed to be able to melt Xiao Hua. Volcanic hell? Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and coldly looked at the gravel rushing towards him. He did not resist at all, and said indifferently, since it's the volcanic hell of the 18 levels of hell, according to the records in the Buddhist scriptures, it should be the 16th layer of hell for those who commit crimes for personal gain, bribe, steal, rob, and commit arson. Let this little criminal be driven into the volcano to be burned alive and not die to be punished. Although this Xiao is a Taoist cultivator, if this Xiao breaks the precepts, I will also be driven into this volcano. However, the heavenly Tao is clear. Who has seen this Xiao break these precepts? Ha ha ha. After hearing a hearty laugh, the volcano, magma, and gravel all disappeared. An indomitable deity appeared. This deity had a human face and a dragon tail. This deity's face was square, with thick eyebrows and big eyes. His appearance looked very ordinary, but in Xiao Hua's eyes, a kind of incomparably amiable, incomparably upright, and incomparably benevolent feeling arose spontaneously. Looking at the deity's dragon tail again, it shone with a golden light. On the large dragon scales, there were innate dragon patterns that were completely different from those of the dragon clan. These dragon patterns gave birth to strange scenes in the golden light. It could be the Great Wasteland Continent, or the Wuming Mountain Range, or the Netherworld. After the deity appeared, it slowly shrank. As the deity's figure descended, the grey space nearby also shrank rapidly, as if this deity's existence was propping up the whole space. At this time, the deity laughed heartily again and said loudly. His voice was like a thunderclap that resounded in the whole space. Spiritual Master Xiao is indeed Spiritual Master Xiao. This king did not misjudge you back then. You really came. However, no matter how large or ordinary this deity's figure was, the suppressing force of Mount Meru that Xiao Hua was already familiar with still existed in the whole space. His many clones and many divine abilities were the same as before on the Sea of Bitterness. They could not be activated. Woo! Shaman King? Hearing the deity's words, Xiao Hua could not help but be surprised again. He looked at the deity that was still like a mountain in disbelief and shouted, Aren't you in the Shaman King village of the Shaman God Ridge? How could you be suppressed under Mount Meru? Ever since Xiao Hua received the Grand Magus token from the Hutu stronghold's Grand Magus, he had thought about how the Grand Magus King would look like. He thought the Grand Magus King might be a kind old man, or a young man who had regained his youth. He might even be a man with extraordinary talent like the Grand Magus of the 12 Magus strongholds in Meng Mountains. However, he had never thought that the Grand Magus King would look like a deity when he waved his hand, and he never thought that the Grand Magus King would be suppressed under Mount Meru. The Shaman King of the Shaman God Ridge is naturally me. The Shaman King answered with a smile. But that's my soul shadow. And the one being suppressed here is my shaman body. In order not to cause panic among the millions of people of Meng Mountains, I have never told them about this. Greetings, Shaman King. If that was the case, how could Xiao Hua dare to be negligent? Hastily, he bowed and said, Thank you, Shaman King, for saving my life. Don't talk about saving my life. The Shaman King smiled and raised his arm. On his thick palm, there seemed to be a lot of calluses. A tremendous force came from under Xiao Hua's body, stopping him from expressing his gratitude. Then, the Shaman King said, Let's not talk about the fact that this place is just a temporary shelter, and you haven't escaped yet. Let's talk about the seed you brought to my descendants several hundred years ago. Over the years, you have saved countless of my descendants. You are my benefactor. You flatter me. Xiao Hua answered humbly. Junior has saved the natives of Wuming Mountain Range, and I have also gained merits. This is an act of mutual benefit, and the Hutu village has also given me many benefits. Junior doesn't dare to claim the credit. Are you talking about Genji and Ziming? The Shaman King smiled and said, they are both good kids. I know that. Senior also knows Ziming. Xiao Hua's face was filled with joy. He asked, is Ziming doing well? Of course she's doing well. If you want to see her, it's not too difficult. The Shaman King answered. Xiao Hua was startled and asked curiously, not difficult? Of course. The Shaman King nodded and said, I have been suppressed here for who knows how many years. I am already tired of this feeling of being suppressed, so I am prepared to exhaust my soul power to send you out of this place. Absolutely not. Xiao Hua hurriedly shouted. If you are no longer here, wouldn't there be no Shaman King in Wuming Mountain Range? Without the Shaman King, would Wuming Mountain Range still be Wuming Mountain Range? Junior came here today to discuss with Senior on how to help Senior get out of this predicament. Escape. The Shaman King's words were filled with helplessness, but his tone was calm. He replied, Daoist Xiao, you have also seen Mount Meru in the place of suppression. The Buddhist kingdom abandoned the center of the 4 great continents, and directly suppressed me in Wuming Mountain Range with the 3,000 Great World. Do you think that with your strength, you can save me? This. Xiao Hua was at a loss for words. He was actually too busy to take care of himself, so how could he save others? What's more, I'm the Shaman King. However, there were Shaman Kings before me, so there will naturally be Shaman Kings after me. A smile appeared on the Shaman King's face as he said, could it be that you think I've asked you to come here just to see you? Did I exhaust my soul power to let you pass through this place of suppression? Ah! Xiao Hua's face revealed an incredulous expression. He said in surprise, Sen. Senior actually wants to give the position of Shaman King to me? Yes. The Shaman King replied, if not, why would I exhaust my soul power to use the soul connection technique? If not, why would I give you the Shaman King token and let you come here? Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, but Senior, I am a Daoist Mahayana realm, and I am about to ascend. He, isn't it just ascension? The Shaman King casually waved his hand and said, if you agree to be the Shaman King of Wuming Mountain Range and Million Mountain Range, I will let you stay in the mortal world for another 10,000 years. Forget it. Xiao Hua shook his head and said with a smile, Senior, there are other humans who are more suitable than me to be the Shaman King. Why do you have to find me? Are you talking about Ziming? The Shaman King frowned and said, she is a child with excellent aptitude, but unfortunately, she has a yin body, so she can't be the Shaman King of Wuming Mountain Rain. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Chidian, vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, collect it, and Chapter 5036. When he spoke up to hear, the Shaman King's eyes suddenly lit up, and he said, Daoist Master Xiao, I remember now. Ziming is deeply devoted to you, and you once charged into the Nether Blood Sea for her. How about this? Let your son be the Shaman King. Ah! Xiao Hua was even more stunned. He looked at the Shaman King and shook his head. Senior, you're too imaginative. Not to mention that I can't see Ziming right now, and not to mention that I'm only close friends with Ziming. Even if I'm in love with Ziming, will my son be able to take the position of Shaman King? After all, a son is a son, not me or Ziming. He can only inherit a part of me and Ziming. It's impossible for him to be a complete copy of us. The Shaman King looked pensive. He pinched his chin and said, Daoist Master Xiao, this is the so-called human nature, right? Every human has it, but every human is different. Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment and nodded. Senior, you're right. This is also human nature. Senior, maybe you were born as a Shaman King and have been suppressed all this time, or maybe you have a strange ability, so you don't know about this, right? If that's the case, then I was wrong. The Shaman King frowned. But, Daoist Master Xiao, can you explain to me what human nature is? Why will your son have human nature? This. Xiao Hua was a bit embarrassed. He thought for a moment and said, Confucian cultivators have said that human nature has both good and evil. Either good is the beginning, or evil is the beginning, or neither good nor evil. Of course, in life, whether human nature is good or evil, it may include self-interest. But people don't live only for self-interest. Otherwise, there won't be noble human nature. Human nature is divided into good and evil levels. Sacrificing oneself for others is great kindness, benefiting others for oneself is good, harming others for oneself is evil, harming others for oneself is evil, harming others without benefiting oneself is great evil. In the name of others, doing self-interest is hypocritical. In the name of self-interest, doing self-interest is hypocritical. Xiao Hua talked a lot, but the shaman king frowned more and more. Xiao Hua saw that he couldn't do it, so he said casually, "Of course, human nature is the foundation of human nature. But it's difficult to say what human nature is." However, when compared to the demon race and the demon race, it was clear. Let's first talk about the demon race. They feed on demon chi and live by devouring. They emphasize the law of the jungle and slaughter. This is their demonic nature. Next, we talk about the demon race. They feed on the stars and moon and live by fighting. There are emotions in human nature. What joy, anger, sorrow, joy, and sorrow. When Xiao Hua's mouth became dry, the shaman king asked again, "Since human nature is so complicated, how can it appear out of thin air? Is it just the sexual intercourse between a man and a woman?" Xiao Hua's heart stirred. He looked at the shaman king in confusion, then pondered for a moment before replying, "Since there is a sky above and earth below in this world, and the human race is divided into men and women, then it's natural for men and women to have sex. There is a saying in the human race that yin cannot be born alone and yang cannot be born alone. Therefore, the heaven and earth are matched with yin and yang. When yin and yang are in harmony, that is the way to longevity. Furthermore, men have a rebellious nature while women have a submissive nature. For those who follow the will of heaven, men take women's submissive nature while women take men's rebellious nature. If men take a rebellious nature while women take a submissive nature, they will mess up the will of heaven, defy the laws of heaven, and invert yin and yang. However, this kind of sexual intercourse can also be done with beasts. Our human race has human nature, but we take its yin and yang, and we communicate with human nature. As he spoke, Xiao Hua raised his left and right hands, revealing Ji Yu and Yi Yun. He looked at Yi Yun and said, "This woman has a submissive nature, but her body has a different characteristic. Our human race calls it the absolute evil profound yin, or even the yin body. If through yin and yang intercourse, this extreme yin object can be drawn out, and it can increase a cultivator's cultivation. If it's purely drawn out, it's extremely sexual intercourse. If it's supplemented with human emotions, it's called yin and yang. Look at this man, he's called Ji Yu." Then, Xiao Hua explained the emotional entanglement of Bai Fei, Ji Yu, and Yi Yun in detail. Finally, he said, "This is emotion, and it can also be considered a side of human nature. This old man is asking you how human nature is born." The shaman king was somewhat displeased. He frowned and said, "If you can't even answer such a small question, how can this old man be at ease handing over the position of shaman king to you?" Hearing this, the doubt on Xiao Hua's face disappeared. He said with a smile, "Senior is wrong again. The birth of human nature is a great mystery of heaven and earth. With the human race's ability, they still can't solve it. Therefore, Junior also can't answer Senior. Moreover, Junior has never promised Senior that I will take over the position of Shaman King. Senior, please find another fated person, right? Daoist Master Xiao, the birth of human nature, is actually so difficult." The Shaman King shook his head in disbelief. However, his tone didn't have any doubts. Instead, it was cold as he asked, "This old man doesn't believe that you're deliberately hiding it." "Ha ha!" Xiao Hua laughed loudly. His right hand protected Ji Yu and Yi Yun. He raised his left hand and pointed at the Shaman King, saying, "The weight of human nature is the foundation of our human race. However, the lightness of human nature is something that no human race has ever pursued. It's because everyone has human nature, although this human nature is different. If someone insists on tangling about what human nature is, then it's not to test whether or not he has the qualifications to be the Shaman King, but because he doesn't have human nature. Do you think this Xiao is right, Sir Formation Spirit?" Damn it. Hearing this, the Shaman King's tone unconsciously changed. He actually cursed secretly. However, it didn't exceed Xiao Hua's expectations. The Shaman King's face didn't have any expression like a smile. It was still abnormally calm. This was similar to the expression of Wen Chu, Daoist Witch, and the other doppelgangers, as well as the Thunderbolt Immortal's expression now. Xiao Hua was used to seeing the doppelganger's ruthlessness and inhumanity. Perhaps he suddenly didn't understand at first, but how could he not understand after that? As for human nature, Xiao Hua could be considered to have painstakingly explained it. However, the origin of human nature. Xiao Hua didn't dare to easily tell this formation spirit. After all, Daoist which devoured 10,000 souls, Huang Tong devoured 10,000 beasts, and Demon Venerable Sha also devoured 10,000 souls to become an independent entity. If this powerful formation spirit knew about this, who knows what kind of bloody storm it would create in Wuming Mountain Rain. You actually saw through my true appearance. The Shaman King, who was actually the formation spirit, was a little surprised and asked, how did you see through it? Xiao Hua touched his nose and laughed. It's very simple, you don't have human nature. Damn it, damn it, damn it. The formation spirit roared a few times and shouted, I don't know what human nature is, that's why I came to ask you. Actually, it's very simple. Xiao Hua laughed, release the great array and leave by yourself. Wander the world of mortals and you can obtain human nature. I am the formation spirit, how can I leave the great array? The formation spirit said angrily, don't think that you can use this trick to deceive me just because you want to break the array and release death. I won't be fooled. Death? Xiao Hua was stunned and asked curiously, your Buddha kingdom's Mount Meru is suppressing death? Which great soul cultivator is this? Do you want to know? The formation spirit smiled faintly and raised his hand to point below him, saying, his right below you. Xiao Hua looked down and saw that below him, which he didn't pay attention to, was formed by layers of flames. The flames were like tassels dancing in the wind, looking very beautiful. However, Xiao Hua understood that these flames were definitely not ordinary flames. Perhaps it was the red lotus karmic fire. As long as a cultivator was trapped in it, they wouldn't be able to escape. The 12 great soul cultivator gods are all famous people. This death great god is naturally a character that the shaman in the Wuming mountain range who didn't know the inside story arbitrarily called. How can he be on the same level as the 12 great gods? Xiao Hua smiled coldly and replied, this kind of character, even if his cultivation is through the heavens, this Xiao disdains to meet him. Ha ha! The formation spirit laughed loudly. Following his laughter, the Mount Meru pressure that Xiao Hua was familiar with reappeared. The flames below him also turned into a sea of fire, gradually covering the space. Now that you're here, how can you not meet him just because you say so? I'm still waiting to see how human nature is born. As he spoke, the suppressive force fell like the sky collapsing, and Xiao Hua fell into the sea of fire without any resistance. Xiao Hua fell into the sea of fire, but the expected red lotus karmic fire did not come as expected. Instead, to Xiao Hua's surprise, the sea of fire began to manifest. All kinds of sounds, fragrances, tastes, and tactile sensations came one after another. Not only that, the flames condensed again, and handsome men and beautiful women were born. Bursts of panting and moaning also crashed into Xiao Hua's ears, and all kinds of sexual intercourse appeared around Xiao Hua like light and shadow. Six desires heaven. Xiao Hua turned pale with fright and hurriedly closed his eyes. Unfortunately, even if Xiao Hua closed his eyes, the situation of 6 desires heaven still clearly fell into his mind. Just as Xiao Hua was lost in thought, he suddenly saw that Ji Yu and Yi Yun had broken free from the shackles of his right hand at some point and were already having sex not far away. Damn it! Xiao Hua cursed in a low voice, knowing that this was the doing of the array spirit. Under Mount Meru, the array spirit was everything. Xiao Hua did not hesitate and hurriedly swayed his body, habitually trying to fly away. To Xiao Hua's surprise, his body flashed away from Ji Yu and Yi Yun, and he arrived at a place where the flames were slightly extinguished. However, before Xiao Hua could speak, a woman with a curvy figure and bronze skin walked out naked from the side of the flames. Looking at her pretty face, Wasn't she Ziming of Hutu Stockade? Xiao Hua suddenly felt that something was wrong and thought that this was an illusion, but when he looked over, he saw clearly that this was the real Ziming, but she had taken off her clothes, so Xiao Hua could not be sure for a while. Ziming. Xiao Hua hurriedly looked into Ziming's eyes and asked in a low voice, "Why are you here?" Unfortunately, Ziming's eyes were dull and expressionless. She only looked at Xiao Hua blankly and did not answer Xiao Hua's question. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please go to Chijian to subscribe to support, vote for a monthly vote for a recommendation vote, bookmark, reward, and thank you for all forms of support. End of update. Thank you for your support. Don't say that you're not happy with it, just read slowly. Chapter 5037. Damn it. Xiao Hua immediately understood the meaning of the formation spirit. He cursed in a low voice and turned around, wanting to leave. Unfortunately, after seeing Ziming, it was already extremely difficult for him to leave. Xiao Hua only felt that his entire body was firmly suppressed by the Mount Sumeru. Although he had a supreme wizard body, he was unable to move at all. He could only watch as Ziming walked over. Even so what? Xiao Hua secretly kept his Taoist heart clear. He wanted to emerge from the mud without being stained, but how could the matrix spirit let him do as he wished? How could the power of 6 desires heaven be resisted by a cultivator from the mortal realm who was being suppressed by Mount Sumeru? Xiao Hua felt his vision go dark, and his instincts had completely taken control of him. There was no need to mention the various details. Time stopped, and the spring breeze sneaked in. After an unknown period of time, Ziming's bronze body was covered in sweat. But the strange thing was, as the sweat formed, waves of the laws of heaven and earth rushed into Ziming's body. Xiao Hua was a body of laws, and now he had achieved the supreme wizard body. Even if Ziming cultivated for another 10,000 or 100,000 years, he would definitely not be able to withstand such an impact. However, under the waves, a 9-colored glow appeared around Ziming's body. This glow became more and more intense. Not only did it cover Ziming's body, but it also blocked Xiao Hua, who had his eyes closed. When the glow was dense, 4 light shadows appeared behind Ziming. These light shadows trembled and emitted strange ripples. Wherever the ripples passed, the void was distorted. Gradually, the light shadows of Ziming's body trembled violently. 2 similar light shadows were born behind Ziming. An indescribable strange movement came from the distorted void. When the waves fell into Ziming's body, his bronze body immediately shrank and turned rose-red, like a beautiful corolla. An extremely beautiful Zhu Xia appeared. However, just as Zhu Xia's figure appeared, it disappeared again, as if this humanoid body could not withstand the wave. The waves fell into Xiao Hua's body with Zhu Xia. Rumble. Thousands of profound meanings surged wildly in Xiao Hua's body like colorful streamers. Heaven and earth merged, and yin and yang were in harmony. This was the moment when the mysteries of the heavenly way were born. Boom, boom, boom. As the profundities within Xiao Hua's body blossomed, the space that was originally enveloped by flames began to rumble with the rumbling of thunder. Layer after layer of the laws of heaven and earth appeared out of nowhere and enveloped Xiao Hua and Zhu Xia. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Waves of immortal qi that had been sealed by Mount Meru were released, and one after another, the lightning tribulation actually appeared at this moment. Damn it. The formation spirit's human-faced dragon-headed figure appeared in the sky. It was still as indomitable as before. However, the formation spirit looked at the lightning tribulation with a worried expression. Who did I offend? I just want to obtain humanity. Why is it so difficult? I've been an array spirit for so many years, but I just want to go out for a walk. Am I wrong? Just when there were some clues, my hope of achieving humanity fell on this Daoist Xiao. Why did the thunder tribulation come? Forget it, forget it. I might as well kill this Daoist master Xiao. Senior. Zhu Xia's figure shyly said in the void, I hope Senior can resist Daoist Xiao's thunder tribulation. Otherwise, Senior's chance of achieving humanity will be gone. Little fox. Although the formation spirit said to kill, its dragon tail still swayed. A layer of sealing power temporarily blocked the thunder tribulation, but it didn't erase it. Instead, it looked at Zhu Xia and asked, "Don't lie to this old man. Is your yin-yang discernment technique real? This Daoist Xiao is a human cultivator who is about to ascend to the immortal world. How could he let this old man obtain humanity?" Zhu Xia didn't reveal her figure, but said softly, "Senior, you might not believe Junior's yin-yang discernment technique. But you should know the Shaman clan's divine connection technique, right? The divine connection technique shows that if you want to obtain humanity, you have to start with this Daoist Xiao, right? Even to the extent that Junior didn't hesitate to do it with Daoist Xiao for you. In the eyes of the formation spirit, there was naturally no such thing as sexual intercourse. He frowned and said, "This old man feels that something is wrong. Is this the only way to obtain humanity? Ah, is there any other way?" Zhu Xia was also dumbfounded. She asked curiously, "Didn't Daoist Xiao just say that this is the way to obtain humanity? Don't tell me there's another way." "But," the formation spirit said coldly, "this old man didn't obtain any humanity. Therefore, this old man can't abide by the previous promise and let this Xiao Hua go. If I don't suppress this place, I will kill him." Gij. Zhu Xia chuckled like a silver bell. "Senior, the heaven collapses and the earth destroys yin and yang. Just now, even Junior sensed the supreme heaven and earth's profound meaning. Don't tell me that you didn't sense it in this Buddhist formation space." The formation spirit was somewhat hesitant. "Humanity isn't formed in a day," Zhu Xia said with some emotion. "Even if a human child is born, it will take 10 months to conceive. Senior is a formation spirit born from heaven and earth. This process will probably take thousands of years. The profound meaning of heaven and earth just now is the primer for Senior to achieve humanity. Senior only needs to carefully comprehend it, and you can definitely achieve humanity and break away from the Buddhist formation." The formation spirit was silent for a long time. The accumulated lightning tribulation was getting thicker and thicker. Zhu Xia was somewhat anxious, but she still hid in the profound meaning and didn't show herself. After half an hour, the formation spirit suddenly stretched out his hand. Boom! The shadow of Mount Meru appeared and immediately destroyed the layers of lightning tribulation. The formation spirit's figure swayed and disappeared. A faint and emotionless voice floated in the air. "This old man will believe you for the time being. However, if this old man finds that something is wrong, you may be able to escape, but that guy will be out of luck. Gij, Senior, don't worry." Zhu Xia smiled and said, "Senior, it's not like you don't know about Junior's remarkable ability. Let's not talk about other things. Junior said that Daoist Xiao will come soon. Isn't he already here? I hope you're right." The formation spirit's voice disappeared, but the suppressive force didn't weaken at all. The formation spirit left, but Xiao Hua didn't wake up. After a long time, Zhu Xia revealed her charming body from the void. She looked at Xiao Hua with tenderness in her eyes, then stretched out her flawless arms and hugged Xiao Hua tightly. Her lips were already on Xiao Hua's cheek as she muttered to herself, "Xiao Hua, this concubine really didn't expect that such a big change would happen today. This concubine only wanted to save you from the formation spirit's hands, but by accident. I got the promise you made to this concubine in the early years. In the early years, this concubine couldn't ask you for help. After all, your strength was too shallow. Moreover, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth on Xiaoyu continent had started to change, and the human race's cultivation was getting increasingly difficult. Only my demon race could stand out in this change. In this concubine's opinion, after you've cultivated for tens of thousands or even 100,000 years and reached the supreme realm of the human race with my help, this concubine would have the nerve to ask you to help this concubine reach the five-tailed realm. This concubine also planned to give my Qingqiu Mountains Corolla to you at that time. Then, this concubine would do what this concubine should do. But this concubine never thought that in just a few hundred years, not even 1,000 years, you would cultivate to the realm of ascension and fulfill this concubine's long-cherished wish, and even surpass this concubine's expectation. This concubine really doesn't know if I should be happy or regretful. After all, without your permission, this concubine has taken away Sister Hongxia's love. This is too sudden. Damn it. Venerable Wu, He must be hiding something. No wonder he said that a new shaman king of Meng Mountains would be born soon. I thought he was talking about you. Who knew? It was actually. At this point, Joshia's beautiful face revealed a heart-wrenching sadness. This sadness caused the entire space to lose its color. I understand now. Venerable Wu wasn't hiding anything. He didn't know what would happen either. He only knew that a new shaman king would be born soon, either Xiao Lang or someone else. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked Ziming to come here at the same time, and he wouldn't have asked me to transform into Ziming's appearance. However, due to a freak combination of factors, how could Ziming's mortal body withstand Xiao Lang's shaman body? But how could a shaman king of Meng Mountains have the bloodline of Qingqiu Mountain? Even if he did, he couldn't let others know. Ziming, oh Ziming, if that's the case, then I'll have to trouble you. As she was speaking, Joshia transformed her graceful body into a gust of wind and escaped from Xiao Hua's body. Even though Joshia was a descendant of Qingqiu Mountain's Yin Fox clan, she was still trembling while standing in midair. She looked at her own proud body, and with a sway of her body, a bronze-skinned Ziming was revealed. Joshia waved her hand again, and from the flame beneath her, Ziming walked out with a flushed face. This Ziming looked exactly like Joshia. However, Ziming's skin was fair, different from the millions of natives of Meng Mountains, while Joshia's skin was bronze-skinned. Ziming. Joshia said apologetically, I know that your friendship with Reverend Xiao is more than love, and you mostly treat him as a confidant. However, now that things have developed to this stage, it's already far beyond our expectations. I'm sure you already know how the next shaman king of Meng Mountains is going to be born. You won't let this shaman king have no roots, right? Somewhat bashfully, Ziming glanced at Xiao Hua and stuttered, I don't know what the shaman king told you, but I believe, for the future shaman king, you'll definitely sacrifice everything. Joshia's long eyelashes fluttered, and she said somewhat self-mockingly, actually, don't you think I've sacrificed more than you? Ziming pondered for a moment, then nodded firmly and said, I understand, you don't have to say anything else. All right, then I'll leave this place to you. Joshia didn't beat around the bush, and replied, don't reveal any flaws. Xiao Hua has a peaceful temperament, but he hates it when others scheme against him, although we didn't scheme against him. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Chijian, vote for it, save it, tip it, and thank all forms of support. Chapter 5038. Hurry up and leave. Ziming's gaze became more and more determined as he urged. Zhu Xia glanced at Ziming with jealousy in her eyes, but when she looked at Xiao Hua again, tenderness reappeared. Zhu Xia couldn't help but walk to Xiao Hua's side and kiss him. She whispered, Xiao Hua, after this farewell, I'm afraid we won't meet again. I don't know if you will forget me when you reach the immortal world. After saying that, Zhu Xia's resolute figure swayed, and the flame under her body disappeared. Ziming looked left and right, gritted his teeth and took off his strange clothes, revealing his snow-white body. Xiao Hua. How could Zhu Xia just leave like this? She hid in the flame, looking at Ziming's painful and joyful expression, and then at Xiao Hua's slightly frowning brows. She said to herself, I don't know if you can notice my narrow-mindedness. After an unknown period of time, Xiao Hua woke up, and an indescribable regret arose from the bottom of his heart. It would be too heartless to say that the spring dream left no trace. Xiao Hua looked at Ziming, who was dressed neatly, but his body was trembling slightly as he knelt in front of him. I went to the wind and snow, and became the wind and snowman again. I patrolled the sky without a trace, and returned in the wind and snow night. The heroic poem was still ringing in his ears. It seemed that the Sky Patrol City was just yesterday, and the sacrificial night was just last night. A woman who could be his eternal confidant had become. What had she become? Xiao Hua couldn't think about it anymore. He didn't want to be the head of Hutu village, nor did he want to be the head of Hutu village, nor did he want to be the head of millions of Meng Mountains. However, fate made fools of people. For the so-called human nature, the damn formation spirit pushed him to an extremely awkward position. Ziming. Xiao Hua thought for a moment, and ignored the formation spirit with a human face and a dragon tail not far away. He said with a smile on his face, Get up, this is all my fault. You don't have to do this. Young master. Ziming's voice trembled with excitement, shyness, and fear. He said in a low voice, "Thank you for your generosity, young master. On behalf of millions of people in Meng Mountains, I thank you." This. Xiao Hua was slightly embarrassed. Even though he didn't remember what had happened earlier, he was clearly aware of the changes in his shaman body. Ziming slightly raised her head. Her face was flushed red like a lotus that had just emerged from the water. Her pair of beautiful eyes looked at Xiao Hua with both worship and love. Her tone changed to rebuke. "Young master, could it be that you regret it?" Sweat. Xiao Hua hurriedly waves his hand and says, "How could this Xiao regret it? It's just that things happened too suddenly. It's fine as long as you don't regret it." Ziming smiled and said, "Sir, you don't need to worry about me. I know what I should do. Are you satisfied now?" Xiao Hua sneered and raised his head. He looked at the array spirit with a human face and a dragon tail and asked, "Can you find the mystery of the birth of human nature?" Daoist Xiao. The array spirit with a human face and a dragon tail had never spoken. Now that he heard Xiao Hua's rebuke, he replied with a smile on his face, "This old man is not the array spirit of Mount Meru's Buddhist formation. This old man is the shaman king of millions of Meng Mountains." Hiss. Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. His face revealed a look of disbelief. He stared at the array spirit with a human face and a dragon tail. Of course, in just a moment, Xiao Hua saw the difference between the two. The array spirit was naturally the array spirit. Even though his tone pretended to be emotional, it sounded cold. But this shaman king with a human face and a dragon tail had a smile on his face. His eyes were filled with joy and excitement. He was not something that the inhumane array spirit could compare to. Senior. Xiao Hua looked at the shaman king with a bitter smile and says, "You have suffered." Xiao Hua had only said the word suffering, but he immediately felt that it was inappropriate. He stole a glance at Ziming, who was crawling over there, and hurriedly changed his words. Senior's divine connection technique is indeed formidable. The real shaman king had already turned into the same size as Xiao Hua. He smiled and said, "When this old man used the God-connecting technique that day, I only knew that Senior was the savior of millions of Meng Mountains, and also our benefactor in the future. I also knew that some unexpected things would happen when Senior came to Wushan Ridge, but what happened today is also beyond my expectation. Senior, please call Junior Xiao Hua or Daoist Xiao." Xiao Hua quickly replied, "Even though Junior has some strength, but with Ziming here, how can Junior dare to call himself Senior? This old man will call you Daoist Xiao." The shaman king was very satisfied with Xiao Hua's modesty. He nodded and said with a smile. After confirming the shaman king's identity, Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment and asked, "What the formation spirit said earlier, is it true?" The shaman king was a little embarrassed and said in a low voice, "As the shaman king of millions of Meng Mountains, this old man has always been suppressed here. The formation spirit knows most of my matters, but the matters of the formation spirit, this old man doesn't know anything, so this old man doesn't know what the formation spirit said to Daois." Xiao Hua understood and told the shaman king what the formation spirit said earlier. The shaman king nodded and said, "What the formation spirit said is correct. This old man's true body has always been under the Buddha formation. Wushan Ridge is just this old man's soul body, or called soul shadow." Then Junior has a few questions to ask Senior. Xiao Hua pondered for a moment and asked, "Daoist, please ask." The shaman king said with a smile, "Now that you and I are family, there's nothing to hide." Xiao Hua's face was slightly red, and he turned to Ziming and said, "Ziming, get up. You being like this makes me uneasy." "Thank you, young master." Ziming cheerfully got up, but Xiao Hua glanced at Ziming and suddenly frowned. He opened his mouth to say something, but hesitated. He turned to look at the shaman king and said, "Senior, can the formation spirit hear what we're saying now? If he wants to know, he will definitely know. If he doesn't want to know, he won't know." The shaman king replied, "However, if Daoist doesn't want him to know, this old man can keep him from knowing for a short period of time." "Oh, there's no need for that now." Xiao Hua understood the shaman king's meaning and nodded, asking, "Senior, since things have happened beyond Senior's expectations, Then, why is Ziming here so coincidentally? This is the place where Senior is suppressed by Mount Meru. Not just anyone can enter, right? Senior, don't say that she coincidentally came to visit Senior. The Shaman King didn't care about Xiao Hua's suspicions in the slightest. Instead, he chuckled and said, "What Daoist said is right. Anyone who encounters such a strange thing will surely ask a few more questions. But, didn't the formation spirit say it before? This old man predicted that Daoist would come to my Wushan Ridge, and that's why I brought the Shaman King's token to Daoist. As for why Ziming can come here, it's something that I've been racking my brains to do. This old man is already old, and I don't have much time left. The Shaman King of Million Meng Mountains hasn't appeared yet, so how can this old man rest assured? This old man used the Divine Connection art to predict that Ziming will encounter some opportunities in Wushan Ridge, and there might be traces of the next Shaman King. That's why this old man ordered Ziming to come here 10 years ago. A few days ago, Ziming suddenly disappeared from this old man's side. Only then did this old man realize that the new Shaman King might be related to the formation spirit. A few days ago. Xiao Hua blinked his eyes, feeling too ashamed to continue asking. However, he gritted his teeth and said, "Since this is a place controlled by the formation spirit, how can Ziming come and go freely?" "Daoist, there's something you don't know," the Shaman King explained. "This Buddha formation is perfectly sealed on the other side of Million Meng Mountains, but there are some flaws on this side of Wushan Ridge. That's why this old man can leave my soul in Wushan Ridge. Furthermore, this Buddha formation has suppressed this old man for a long time, and the formation spirit only watches over this old man. As long as this old man doesn't leave the Buddha formation, he will turn a blind eye to the coming and going of other people. That means..." Xiao Hua suddenly felt a joy in his heart, and he quickly asked, "This junior can also leave at any time?" "Of course." The Shaman King nodded affirmatively. "But, when someone comes and goes, this old man will have to guide them." "That's great." Xiao Hua clapped his hands and said with a smile, "If that's the case, this junior can rest assured." "What?" The Shaman King smiled and asked, "Daoist, have you agreed to be the Shaman King of Million Meng Mountains?" Xiao Hua asked curiously, "Since this junior has become the Shaman King, how can I leave this place?" "Then Daoist has agreed to let Ziming's descendant be the Shaman King?" The Shaman King took a step forward and asked. Xiao Hua furrowed his brows, recalling his previous question. He hesitated for a moment and asked, "Speaking of which, this junior is a little surprised. Why did Ziming?" Hearing this, the Shaman King raised his hand and pointed at a dragon scale beside him. A dragon scale the size of a fist flew out, and on top of this dragon scale, there was a tiny 9-colored dot the size of a sesame seed. It shone like a bright star, and a rich life force rushed into the void from this 9-colored dot. The Shaman King glanced at this dragon scale kindly, and said with a smile, "Is this what Daoist is talking about?" Xiao Hua's expression turned cold, and he quickly raised his head. Sure enough, at this moment, there was some blood red appearing in the sky. It should be the Shaman King casting a spell to block the formation spirit's prying. "Senior, what is the meaning of this?" Xiao Hua asked coldly. The Shaman King didn't answer, and instead pointed at the dragon scale again. The dragon scale landed on the dragon tail, and the blood red in the sky had already been torn apart by the powerful suppressive force. "Nothing, this old man just has something to discuss with you," the Shaman King explained. "However, this matter is the most important. After the discussion, this old man will send you away. Moreover, this matter came too suddenly. This old man also needs to think about it, and we'll talk about it at the end. What else do you have to say? Ask first." "All right." Xiao Hua looked around and asked, "Where is this place? Is it still the 16 layers of hell? Where is this place?" This old man also doesn't know. The Shaman King shook his head, because this old man has never left this place. However, Daoist came down from above this space. If above is the 15th layer of hell, then this place is the 16th layer of hell. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to Chidian to subscribe to support, cast a monthly vote, cast a recommendation vote, collect a collection, reward, and thank all forms of support. Chapter 5039. That's not it. Xiao Hua shook his head. Above us were the hell of tongue pulling, the hell of scissors, the hell of tree of iron, the hell of mirror of retribution, the hell of steamers, the hell of bronze pillars, the hell of iceberg, the hell of volcano, and so on. If I'm not wrong, this should be the 17th layer of the hell of stone grindstone, and below us is the 18th layer of the hell of knife saw. The Shaman King pondered for a moment and said in a low voice, after I succeeded in the God-connecting technique, the first thing I wanted to know was how to break the suppression of this Buddhist formation. I obtained a subtle message from the God-connecting technique that the key to breaking the Buddhist formation is below me. If it's as Daoist said, then my God-connecting technique should be correct. Xiao Hua lowered his head and looked down. Sure enough, numerous enormous millstone-like seals firmly confined the lower layer of the space. Layers of golden runes faintly emerged from the gaps between the millstone-like seals. Xiao Hua couldn't release his soul awareness at the moment, so he didn't know how powerful these seals were. However, seeing that even the Shaman King was helpless against them, he clearly understood that he was probably powerless as well. So Xiao Hua smiled bitterly and said, "Senior, this matter, Junior really can't help." "Haha, Daoist, don't worry." The Shaman King laughed and said, "This is my fate. I never thought of escaping from here, so you don't have to think too much about it." "If that's the case," Xiao Hua thought and asked again, "Senior, do you know the origin of this Buddhist formation that's suppressing you?" "I don't know." The Shaman King's answer was very straightforward. "The truth of this matter has already been drowned in the long flow of time, and I can't leave this place, so I can't go to the Meng Mountains to investigate carefully. How can I know the origin of this Buddhist formation?" But then, just as Xiao Hua was disappointed, the Shaman King changed the topic again. From the bones and shaman cannon in Wushan Ridge, as well as chatting with the formation spirit. "What? You chatted with the formation spirit?" Xiao Hua was flabbergasted and asked in disbelief. The Shaman King smiled and said, "How could Daoist forget? Didn't you talk to the formation spirit just now? God knows how many years, there's only one formation spirit and me here. If we don't talk, who do we talk? What's more, the formation spirit keeps trying to find some kind of human nature. If he doesn't ask me, who else can he ask? Then Senior didn't trick him into letting you go?" Hearing about human nature, Xiao Hua felt a headache coming on. "Zhenren, you're overthinking things." The Shaman King laughed and said, "He is only an array spirit and not the person who set up the array. If the Buddhist array is not broken, how can I leave? The fact that he can tolerate my soul being in the Wushan Ridge is already his greatest tolerance. That said, from what I know, this Buddhist formation is a heaven-reaching spell formation that contains the power of a chiliocosm of worlds from the Buddhist schools, as well as the weight of the sea of bitterness. It's not just suppressing me, it's suppressing the legacy of soul cultivators. Of course, the Shaman King represents the legacy of millions of soul cultivators in Meng Mountains. If you can suppress me, you can also suppress all soul cultivators. Because of this suppression, the legacy of my soul cultivation was loss. Time-lapse is the name given to me by the previous Shaman King. He wanted me to remember the humiliation of being a soul cultivator, and to find my inheritance through time. The smile on the Shaman King's face slowly disappeared. But to this day, I still haven't taken even half a step out of the Buddhist formation. I can't even see the slightest hope. Hearing this, Xiao Hua wanted to say something, but he knew that everything was under the surveillance of the formation spirit. He couldn't reveal the slightest bit of information. Therefore, he shook his head slightly to express his sympathy. Since Senior doesn't know what the Buddhist formation that suppresses millions of Meng Mountains is, then does Senior know about the demon formation that separates the Dawn Rain continent from the other 3 continents? Xiao Hua asked tentatively. The Shaman King was startled and asked curiously, "What 3 continents? Apart from the Dawn Rain continent, there are 3 other continents. Or is there another continent called the 3 continents? If Senior doesn't know, then it's fine." Xiao Hua was a little disappointed. He waved his hand and said, "Junior was just asking casually." Then, Xiao Hua pointed at Ji Yu and Yi Yun, who were lying in the distance and covered with clothes, and said, "How are they now?" "They are fine. It's just that they seem to be cultivating some kind of secret technique, so it's not good to disturb them." That's why I imprisoned them first. The Shaman King said curiously, but who are they? When Reverend fell, did they also fall? Hehe, they are two infatuated people. Xiao Hua briefly explained the cause of the matter. Hearing this, the Shaman King sighed, and Ziming's eyes were filled with envy. But after a while, the Shaman King's expression became tense again, and he said, as Reverend said, these two Daoist cultivators are actually the disciples of the Defeat You Immortal Alliance at Wuming Mountains. Many cultivators of the Defeat You Immortal Alliance have been possessed by the devil race. This time, there are even divinity separation cultivators coming over. This has a great impact on the Dawn Rain continent's Daoist sect. Senior doesn't seem to know much about the Yi Lin continent, right? Xiao Hua asked tentatively. The Shaman King nodded and said, I've only heard about the situation there from the formation spirit, so I don't know much about it. Moreover, I'm most interested in the Wuming Mountains. Xiao Hua thought for a while, and roughly explained the situation of the Yi Lin continent and Wuming Mountains. Finally, he said, the Yi Lin continent is a place where Daoist sects flourish. Compared to the Yi Lin continent, the Dawn Rain continent is a lost land. But compared to the millions of Meng Mountains, the Wuming Mountains is also a lost land of soul cultivators. Unfortunately, the Shaman King only said 2 words, and didn't say anything else. But Xiao Hua understood that the Shaman King was regretting that his main body couldn't go to the Wuming Mountains, and couldn't spread the soul cultivators' orthodoxy in the Wuming Mountains. At this time, Ziming asked in a low voice, Young Master, did you cultivate your cultivation base on the Yi Lin continent? After I parted ways with Young Master at the Back Earth Stockade, I took over the management of the stockade. I didn't have time to ask about the worldly affairs. After I sorted out the affairs of the stockade, I heard about the outcome of the Sword War, and Young Master, as a great contributor, was actually expelled by the Imperial Thunder Sect. Then, what was even more inconceivable was that on the Dawn Rain continent, there was no more news about Young Master, as if Young Master had disappeared into thin air. It wasn't convenient for me to ask the Imperial Thunder Sect, so I could only ask my trusted servant to ask Big Sister Hongxia. Oh, what did she say? Xiao Hua's heart moved, and the expression in his eyes became complicated as he asked. Ziming gave a rare sweet smile, and asked in return, Young Master, guess. Xiao Hua thought for a moment, and said, My experience is quite bizarre. When I left the Dawn Rain continent, no one knew about it. Hongxia probably thought that I had met with misfortune long ago. Hehe, Young Master is wrong. Ziming pursed her lips and smiled. Big Sister Hongxia didn't give me a clear answer, but she did give me a gather. This gather made me feel slightly relieved. Oh, what gather? Xiao Hua was a little puzzled. In this world, there were indeed people who had telepathy, but he didn't think that after being separated by the immortal formation, Fairy Hongxia could still have telepathy with her. Only in the mortal world, the fate is shallow, I don't know where to go. Ziming seemed to have a deep impression of this gather, so she casually recited it, and smiled, although Young Master's whereabouts are uncertain, as long as you're alive, isn't this better than anything else? But this concubine really didn't expect that after 1,000 years, this concubine would actually inadvertently meet Young Master again. Hee. When Xiao Hua heard this, he raised his head to look at the sky filled with flames, and said with a smile, My privacy has already been seen by that fellow. Let's not talk about it today. When we reach the Hutu stronghold, I will explain it to you in detail. Ziming of course knew what Xiao Hua was talking about, and her face unconsciously turned even redder. She lowered her head and said, If Young Master is going to the Hutu stronghold, you still need to inform Elder Wu first, so that he won't be caught off guard. Xiao Hua's face revealed a trace of awkwardness. Just as he was about to explain, the Shaman King also frowned, and said in a low voice, Daoist, this matter still needs to be discussed at length. Wait for me to gather the funds first. Xiao Hua helplessly smiled and said, Senior is thinking too much. Junior originally wanted to give Ziming a surprise, but since Junior going to the Hutu stronghold will cause some misunderstanding, then I'll ask Elder Wu of the Hutu stronghold to come out with the Soul Falling Lamp. Soul Falling Lamp? The Shaman King was slightly stunned, and asked curiously, What do you want the Soul Falling Lamp for? On the other hand, Ziming's body suddenly shook, and her face turned pale. Her eyes looked at Xiao Hua, and she said in disbelief, young master, are you talking about Ziyi? Xiao Hua nodded at her, and said with a smile, this is your biggest regret in this life. This Xiao can also be considered as compensation for you. However, this Xiao wants to ask, did you preserve Ziyi's body well? Of course, it's in a secret place in the ancestral hall, Elder Wu knows. As Ziming spoke, her small hands were tightly clenched, and her knuckles were white. Her teeth were also tightly biting her lips, not daring to cry out in alarm, and not daring to let tears of joy flow down. She was not clear about what level Xiao Hua's cultivation had reached, but she was naturally sensitive to Xiao Hua's shaman body. She knew that Xiao Hua was no longer the same as before, and 1,000 years of cultivation had already far exceeded her imagination. However, her imagination still did not surpass Xiao Hua's strength. She did not dare to imagine what level Xiao Hua's method of saving Ziyi was at in this world. However, Ziming clearly knew that this kind of divine ability, this kind of strength must be hidden from the formation spirit. If the formation spirit knew that Xiao Hua had such a heaven-defying soul cultivation strength, it was likely that great waves would arise. Ziyi. The Shaman King obviously did not know who Ziyi was, and he was somewhat puzzled. Ziming gave him a look, and said with a smile, Shaman King, this is Junior's private matter. Later, Junior will explain in detail to Senior. Haha, that's good. Then this old man can rest assured. The Shaman King naturally felt somewhat guilty about the matter of sacrificing Ziming. Seeing that Ziyi and Xiao Hua had a common secret, he also laughed out loud. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to Chijian to subscribe to support, vote for a month, vote for a recommendation, collect, reward, and thank you for all forms of support. Chapter 50-40. Hearing Xiao Hua's words and hearing the Shaman King's laughter, Ziming suppressed the ecstasy in her heart and lowered her head slightly. While sighing with emotion, she couldn't help but feel the sweetness in her heart, and her previous grievances gradually disappear. To be able to do something for the future Shaman King of millions of Meng Mountains, and exchange it for Zai's resurrection, even if Ziming was asked to die right now, she would never hesitate. Moreover, what she lost was something she didn't want to lose, but what she lost was obtained by this person in front of her, and that was something she could accept. Ziming even secretly glanced at Xiao Hua, as she had some extravagant hopes for the future. Although she knew that this was just an extravagant hope, a dream that was unlikely to come true. Ziming. After the Shaman King finished laughing, he said, Hutu Stronghold is one of the few shaman strongholds in millions of Meng Mountains that are close to Dao sect. Since your identity will be different in the future, the important task of connecting us soul cultivators and Dao sect will fall on your shoulders. Yes, Junior understands. Ziming's heart trembled, and she answered respectfully. Then, she looked at Xiao Hua and said, but this matter is too important. If young master can take on this responsibility, it will be even better. I think with young master's strength, when you return to Dao sect, you will definitely be one of the best. Giving orders for this matter will be as easy as turning over your hand. Xiao Hua frowned and thought for a while, then nodded and said, Ziming, don't worry about this. Although I don't have much time, I will tell my disciples about this matter. Your disciples? Ziming was puzzled, and asked curiously, wasn't young master expelled by Thunder Controlling Sect? Why do you still have disciples? The Shaman King was even more puzzled, and asked, Reverend, you don't have much time? What do you mean? After the Shaman King finished speaking, he suddenly realized something. He sucked in a cold breath and cried out in disbelief, Senior, could it be? Hearing the Shaman King call Xiao Hua Senior again, Ziming was puzzled. But suddenly, she realized that this senior referred to the senior who had ascended, and was different from the senior who referred to shaman physique. Immediately, the previous joy and extravagant hope disappeared like flowing water, and a huge regret was born. Good moments are always short. Ziming couldn't help but think to herself. Senior. Xiao Hua smiled modestly and replied, the path of Dao is uncertain, and no one knows the end. This junior was only lucky enough to take a few more steps, so I don't deserve to be called a senior. On the other hand, senior, you have never stepped out of this seal in your entire life, and yet you have racked your brains to come up with a plan for the millions of soul cultivators in Meng Mountains. This is far beyond what this junior can achieve. If you call this junior senior, don't you think you are neglecting the essentials and focusing on the trifles? Alas! The Shaman King sighed and said, although I can't take half a step, I've seen countless heroes, but which one of them is as humble as Daoist? If he didn't have a solid foundation, a strong defense, confidence, and breadth of mind, how could he be so magnanimous? If Zhenren's cultivation is not successful, then who can achieve great success? Senior, please don't flatter me, Xiao Hua said with a smile. The more Junior cultivates, the more I understand the vastness of the world, and the more fearful I feel in my heart. I cultivate even more nervously, and even if I want to be bossy and domineering, I can't. I already knew that young master could reach this stage when I saw young master in the Sky Patrol City. Ziming also sighed with emotion, but I didn't expect this day to come so soon. Oh, Ziming. Xiao Hua turned to Ziming and said, this Xiao's sect is called the Fortune Gate. In the future, this Xiao will send the Fortune Gate's sect master to contact you. Fortune Gate? Ziming was stunned, and looked at Xiao Hua from head to toe, and asked curiously, didn't young master just return to Meng Mountains? How did you know that there is a Fortune Gate on the Dawn Rain mainland that worships Daoist Xiao? Ah! Xiao Hua was also stunned, and asked curiously, there is also a Fortune Gate on the Dawn Rain mainland? Speaking of me, Xiao Hua immediately thought of Zhong Haoren, Fei Yunshu, Zhong Zhon, Qin Ji, and Zhong Pei. If there was no accident, this Fortune Gate that worships Daoist Xiao was established by them. Xiao Hua didn't expect that Zhong Haoren, who was merely a foundation establishment cultivator, would be able to do such a big thing. Yes. Ziming nodded, and said, of course there is a Fortune Gate on the Dawn Rain mainland, but this Fortune Gate is different from ordinary sects, and is not a real sect. It can be considered an alliance. It appeared about 40 years after young master went missing, and now it can be considered to have developed for several hundred years, and has some scale. Oh! What do you mean? Xiao Hua originally thought that it was Zhong Haoren who established the Fortune Gate, but when he heard Ziming's words, it seemed to be different from what he thought. He asked curiously, why is the Fortune Gate an alliance? It can't be considered an alliance, because there is no such thing as an alliance leader, and there are no common interests between them. Ziming explained, however, these sects all worship young master, and treat Daoist Xiao as their own sect master. Ziming naturally knew a lot about Xiao Hua, and was about to slowly explain when the Shaman King beside him coughed twice, and said, it won't be too late to talk about these things after you return. Daoist Xiao, this old man doesn't have much time left, and now is the time when the formation spirit's monitoring is relatively weak. This old man should discuss the most important matter with you first, okay? While speaking, the Shaman King opened his mouth, and a mouthful of dark green blood essence spurted out. Along with the Shaman King's chanting, green seal characters that weren't much bigger than ants appeared in midair. Different from the Dao Gate's incantation, the green seal characters didn't fall into the blood essence, but the blood essence suddenly exploded, and turned into a blood net that covered the green seal characters. The Shaman King's chanting didn't just resound in the ears, but in Xiao Hua's soul. Naturally, following the rhythm, layers of blood runes appeared above everyone's heads. They were like fish that avoided the suppressive force that filled the space. They turned into blood clouds that blocked the sky that looked like it was made of fire. Xiao Hua slightly frowned, because he already sensed that the Shaman King's blood traces contained soul power, and the formation of the green seal characters also affected the Shaman King's lifespan. Looks like. Xiao Hua looked at the Shaman King's human face and dragon tail, and thought to himself, the Shaman King's body is still not a true shaman body, and still can't use the true green seal characters. Daoist. The Shaman King looked at the blood cloud somewhat cautiously, and didn't say anything, but instead transmitted his voice, this matter is of great importance, this old man doesn't dare to be careless, why don't you try transmitting your voice? The transmission the Shaman King spoke of was naturally the transmission of soul techniques. Xiao Hua urged his weak soul power and replied, of course, I don't know what Senior wants to discuss with Junior. Naturally, it's the next Shaman King. The Shaman King smiled slightly, and a trace of hope appeared in his eyes. His expression became increasingly calm, as if he already had a plan. Xiao Hua pondered for a moment, then raised his head and looked at the Shaman King. Staring at the Shaman King's eyes, he asked word by word, "Senior." Although Senior has already explained it earlier, it wasn't particularly detailed. Junior still doesn't understand. The birth of the Shaman King. What does it have to do with me? The Shaman King wasn't surprised, and he didn't avoid Xiao Hua's questioning gaze. His expression remained the same, and his smile didn't change. He replied, "Speaking of this matter, this old man has to explain to Daoist the origin of the Shaman King of Million Meng Mountains, as well as the birth of the Shaman King." At this moment, Xiao Hua couldn't use any special divine ability, so he could only rely on observing the Shaman King's body language to determine the truth of the matter. He also knew that the Shaman King had lived for an unknown number of years, just like the elders of the Dragon Island. If the Shaman King wanted to conceal some of the truth from him, even if Xiao Hua stared at him without blinking, he might not be able to see anything. However, he still stared at the Shaman King, because there was always a trace of guilt towards Zimming in the bottom of his heart. Seeing Xiao Hua didn't ask any questions, and instead stared at him, the Shaman King sighed in his heart. The matter this time was too unimaginable. Not to mention Xiao Hua, the person involved, even he, as a bystander, felt it was inconceivable. Therefore, the Shaman King followed the plan he had carefully pondered a moment ago, and told Xiao Hua everything he had to conceal, and everything he had to say. "Daoist, I believe you've also seen my current appearance. This is actually not my true body, but the body of the Shaman King. In other words, no matter when Daoist comes to the Shaman King village of Shaman God Ridge, the Shaman Kings you see will always be like this. This body doesn't look like one of the 12 great gods. Speaking of which, it might be the 13th great god of soul cultivators who has never been clear. But as for who this 13th great god is, even I, and even the previous Shaman Kings, don't know. Before being suppressed, how the Shaman Kings were found, and how they were selected, I don't know. Those are already ancient secrets that have long been discarded in the long river of time. There's no meaning in investigating them now. But I know clearly how the Shaman Kings were produced after being suppressed by the Buddhist formation. This is the most important task I have to complete after assuming the responsibility of being a Shaman King. It is also the core of my soul cultivation inheritance. Similarly, it is also the humiliation of us soul cultivators who have to endure humiliation and drag out an ignoble existence. After each generation of Shaman Kings takes the position, the first thing they have to practice is the God-connecting technique. Of course, because each generation of Shaman Kings is carefully selected and born with witchcraft luck, although this God-connecting technique is the supreme soul cultivation technique of my soul cultivators, each generation of Shaman Kings can successfully practice it. The only difference is the length of time. The God-connecting technique is different from ordinary soul cultivation techniques. The purpose of practicing the God-connecting technique is not for the Shaman King himself, but for the new generation of Shaman Kings. Once the God-connecting technique is successfully practiced, the first God-connecting technique of the Shaman King must be used to find the traces of the new Shaman King. I believe Daoist also knows that the God-connecting technique might not necessarily succeed, and the information obtained might not be true. But, as long as the God-connecting technique is successfully practiced for the first time, the information obtained will definitely be true. This is also the reason why the Shaman Kings of Meng Mountains attach great importance to the first God-connecting technique. P.S. To all the fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Chijian, vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, bookmark it, or tip it. Thank you, League Master only smoking half a cigarette from Nanjing. This chapter will be updated for you. Also, thank you to all the fellow Taoists who supported the third place.